Chapter 982. The Buddhist swastika was the symbol of the swastika. In Liu Xiaoyi's previous life, the swastika was the symbol of Buddhism, while the swastika was the symbol of an evil empire. The swastika was one of the 32 signs of Buddha. This sign was called Shirley Luo Chana, also known as the auspicious sea and cloud sign. Buddhism used the right as the right path. For example, one had to turn 3 times to the right to worship Buddha. The white hair between Buddha's eyebrows also turned to the right. Therefore, the swastika was the symbol of auspiciousness. The swastika represented the boundless power of Buddhism, extending in all directions endlessly saving and benefiting all living beings. The swastika was the heart sign of Buddha. It could also be seen as the symbol of the sacred sun or the sacred flame. It represented firmness, eternity, warding off evil and good luck. Those who could cultivate the swastika seal in Buddhism were all virtuous people who had the root of wisdom in Buddhism. It was not something that ordinary monks could master. The root of wisdom mentioned here could be understood as innate wisdom to a large extent. To put it bluntly, it was the reincarnation of a virtuous senior monk. According to Buddhism, one could only cultivate the swastika if they had reincarnated 3 times and served Buddha as usual. Just from his point alone, this monk was not simple. Of course, Liu Xiaoyi was very disdainful of those illusory reincarnations. He valued reality. This monk was able to injure Qing Xian, which meant that he was really capable. It was not only because of the swastika's indestructible ability, but also because of the monk's ability to attack, judgment of the situation, insight into the opponent, utilization of the environment, and so on. Once the attack succeeded, he would not stop, clean and tidy, without any hesitation. This was a very powerful opponent. Qing Xian's injury was not unjustified. At this point, how to cause trouble and how to snatch the Taishu fragment was no longer important. The important thing was how to get rid of this monk. It was not easy because this monk did not only have the swastika to attack, he also had the swastika to defend himself. In other words, this monk had trained his body to become one of the 32 signs of Buddha. His entire body was a converged swastika. As long as he was willing, he could emit an unlimited amount of swastika light, as if Buddha had come to the world. However, this monk had never revealed it. He had always kept a low profile and restrained the scattered light. He was incomparably sturdy and stood eternally, surrounded by auspiciousness. In such a state, Liu Xiaoyi doubted whether his sneak attack would be able to break through the defense. If he used all of his strength to launch a shocking attack, he would definitely attract the attention of the other party. It would be very troublesome. The person who could defeat Qing Xian was not just for show. He, Liu Xiaoyi, also needed to be cautious when dealing with him. The group of Taoists were not all blind. Apart from Liu Xiaoyi, there were other Taoists who noticed that the monk was different from the rest. After all, he had attacked 3 times. To a nascent soul cultivator, it was impossible for him to escape their eyes. That's the Arhut. Everyone, be careful. Don't get imprinted by a swastika. A kind Yuanying reminded in a low voice. Arhut. Liu Xiaoyi shook his head and chuckled. In the world of cultivation, there were always busybodies who liked to spread such things. The so-called Arhut was actually a monk who had obtained a merit shard. They might have a breakthrough in their Tao state, and their strength would increase greatly. Correspondingly, if there was an Arhut, there would also be a Taoist. For example, if there was an Arhut, there would be a Taoist. For example, if there was a Taoist, there would be a lot more shards in the future. What kind of Taoist was that? Liu Xiaoyi complained in his heart. Instead of being a Taoist, why not be a Taoist? Taoist or Buddhist Taoist, both were fine. He was not picky. He was actually a little puzzled in his heart. The 12 spaces were not suitable in the context of fighting for the shards of the great Tao. It was better to set up a simple arena, and the winner would get the shards. For example, the ruins of the Anne's Cave might have felt that the arena was too crude to show its level of half-immortal. Therefore, it came up with such a method of competition. It was very time-consuming. It was also very torturous. If he did not have a way to quickly collect the shards, when would the winner be decided in each space? To decide the ownership of the shards? It would probably be a bloody result. It was hard to say how many cultivators would survive. In this sense, he had saved the lives of all the other cultivators. Of course, others would not think so. In the last space, it would be a typical chaotic battle. Unless one side was completely eliminated, there would be an internal battle after the external battle. In the end, there would only be one person left. In order to preserve more seeds for the cultivation world, he was willing to work harder. However, with this monk who was playing with swastikas, he was not sure if he could successfully snatch the shards under his nose. To snatch the shards, he had to use the divine bird. If he used the divine bird, he would not be able to use his flying sword. In such a complicated environment, what did it mean if he, a thin-skinned swordsman, could not use his flying sword? Usually, he did not need to think so much because using the divine bird was not his main fighting style. However, he could not do it now. Even if he only used the divine bird for a short moment, with the monk with swastikas around, he did not dare to act rashly. He could only wait. Wait for a good opportunity. Wait for the monk to be entangled with others, or leave for a short time, or something else. During this period, the deaths of the cultivators on both sides were not something he could take care of. Therefore, he did not have any psychological pressure. Since he started cultivating, his heart was as hard as stone. As someone who had reached the level of the Yuaning Bodhisattva, he was very clear about what he should do and what he should not do, including the choice between life and death. Waiting was a kind of torture, but a good sneaky person had to have such qualities. The monk, Yi Hang, was also waiting, but his method was different. He knew about the existence of the swordsman. It was not someone who told him, but he saw it with his own eyes. He had obtained 5 shards of the great Tao, but it did not mean that he had only entered 5 spaces. In fact, he had entered 6 spaces. In the last space, he was a little late, and the swordsman was faster than him. Therefore, he knew that there was such an existence in Taoism who had the same ability as him and could instantly snatch the shards. Perhaps the nature of the ability was different, but the effect was the same. The last chance he could find to deal with the swordsman was in the last space. While the swordsman was attacking, he secretly placed a seal on his body. It was not difficult to do this in a chaotic battle between hundreds of people. However, his problem was that he could not only achieve his goal by himself, but also had to help the Buddhist disciples gain an overwhelming advantage over the Taoists in this feast of slaughter. This was the reason why he was sent here. Otherwise, with the situation where he had already fused with the shards of virtue, there was no need for him to come here. The only thing he could do was to help the Buddhist disciples kill the most troublesome Taoists. However, he also deliberately reduced his attacks and pretended that he did not notice the swordsman, hoping that the swordsman would act rashly. Both of them were waiting and enduring, hoping that the other would be the one to make the first move. Their target was not the shards, but each other. How could an otherworldly item be as good as a sneaky person? Chapter 983. Monk Yi Hang's swastika seal was very different from a normal bodhisattva's dharma. It was cast silently, and it did not pursue the shocking sound and light effects of most dharma. It was very fast, and there was no need to prepare for the accumulation of power. Most importantly, the swastika's ability to infect was very strong. When the swastika entered the body, the light of Buddha would flourish in the cultivator's body. Just like Liu Xiaoyi's flying sword, it looked ordinary and simple. Once it entered the body, the sword aura would wreak havoc. This was something that every cultivator who was proud of being a Yin cultivator pursued tirelessly. Just like Qing Xian, whose 3 pristines were already the top in the cultivation world, it could not be completely removed after a few years of being hit by the swastika. This was the foundation of the 3 pristines. If it was other Taoism, one could imagine, especially for a Taoism like Sword Vein, which was slightly inferior to orthodox Taoism in terms of cultivation. Once it was hit by the swastika, It would not be long before it lost its ability to fight. The swastika was not known for its destructive, penetrative, or destructive power. However, its danger was that after being hit by the swastika, the cultivator would instantly form a Dharma world in his secret. He would become a little light figure that was emitting light of Buddha. No matter how profound his Taoism was, how much could he use? Destroying a Taoist foundation through this was a very targeted method that was most suitable for beating up a Taoist. Lu Xiaoyi was very clear about this. So was Monkey Hang. However, both of them pretended to be ignorant. This was the nature of a sneaky person. The monks once again broke through the Taoist defense circle. Their advantage in numbers was getting bigger and bigger. It was so big that Lu Xiaoyi became very passive in this wait. He realized that he could not keep waiting. When there were only a few Taoists left, his body would be full of iron. How could he withstand a few hits from the monks? The change in the general situation put him in a disadvantageous situation. Moreover, the monks seemed to be very stable. He did not give him any chance to sneak an attack. During the attack, he hid within the group of monks and did not stand out. He also did not really go deep into the core to take the shard. He could only change it himself. However, this required the cooperation of the Taoists. He was not qualified to command these Taoists. He could not even make suggestions. What he hoped for was that these Taoists would make some kind of choice. They had to make a choice. Under the situation where the number of Taoists was decreasing, no one would be able to obtain it if they continued to dawdle. And he had to pay with his life. They had to send someone to retrieve the shard. With the current number of Taoists, they could still barely maintain the defense. If there were even fewer people, even if they sent someone to retrieve the shard, they wouldn't have enough time to remain undisturbed. No one who could cultivate to the level of yuanying was mediocre. Every Taoist was well aware of the direction of the battle. Now that the battle had reached this stage, it was no longer possible for them to take advantage of the situation. With hundreds of monks staring at them, the moment they bent down, they would immediately become the target of a group of monks. The Taoists quickly reached a consensus and recommended a Taoist to fuse with the shard, while the others would cover for him. The selection of candidates had nothing to do with their strength, reputation, or background. It was all about their wealth. A Taoist from Zhouxian Qingwei, immortal sect, was very rich and overbearing. He promised everyone who covered for him would be rewarded with 50 strands of pure jade spiritual essence. Once such a big move was made, most of the Taoists immediately responded. With spiritual essence and no need to fight endlessly, this was the best choice for the group of Taoists. Lu Xiaoyi was prepared to make the first move, because only by making the first move, the monk would follow. He wasn't sure if the monk would take the risk after the Taoists had decided on the candidate to fuse with the shard. To him, this was a rare opportunity in the ultimate. If he missed this opportunity, where'd he find the monk again? If they were to fight in the universe, the flaw in his cultivation might not guarantee that he would be able to defeat the monk. He believed that his ability to adapt in a chaotic situation was unparalleled. The Taoists had already started to set up their defense. Lu Xiaoyi was also prepared to approach. At this moment, a divine sense was transmitted to him. I reckon that among these people, there are others like you who can quickly retrieve the shard. But I don't know if he's a Taoist or a Buddha. You have to be careful. Don't get tricked. This was Ka Wa's divine sense. In the end, she still decided to come in because she wasn't sure if this daring guy knew about the existence of such a person. She needed to remind him that this was the only thing she could do. By the time the divine sense was transmitted, the person had already escaped to find a place to hide until the battle was over. Lu Xiaoyi stopped what he was doing. When Kawa said this, he immediately knew that the other person who could instantly retrieve the shard was very likely this monk. This was his intuition and also his judgment. With this information, he knew that the monk would definitely take the risk, because he wouldn't allow the Taoists to obtain the shard, especially in the current situation where the Buddhists were strong. There was no need for him to take the risk. He could continue to wait quietly for the monk to make his move. Senior sister's news came at the right time. The choice was thrown to Yihang. According to his judgment, this greedy swordsman would definitely not let go of the shard. As long as the swordsman made a move to snatch it, he would place a seal behind him. However, the swordsman seemed to have no intention of doing so. He only wandered around the periphery leisurely, as if he was watching a show. He couldn't wait any longer. If he waited any longer, the shard would be taken away by one of the Taoists, and this battle would lose its meaning. He had obtained 5 shards, but the swordsman might have obtained 6. He couldn't tolerate such a failure. Since he couldn't win with a scheme, he would use an open scheme. The monk beside him said, "Buddha is merciful. Let the sky be cleansed. Now that the number of Buddhists and Taoists has almost doubled, let's go all out this time and try to defeat them completely." The monk beside him nodded. It was time. If they delayed any longer, the shard would be taken away. Their current strength was enough for them to make a comprehensive breakthrough and chase away the Taoists who were surrounding the shard. The Taoists were setting up their defenses while the monks were organizing their attacks. The atmosphere became tense as everyone knew that the outcome was about to be revealed. Lu Xiaoyi also joined the group of Taoists. It wasn't appropriate for him to stay outside, as he wouldn't be able to make a move if there were any changes. He could only blend in with the crowd and keep an eye on the monk. The preparation was very fast. No one wanted to delay any longer. The Buddha's light opened up the path, and the Buddha's voice lingered in the air. Various forms of Dharma appeared in the sky, including bodhisattvas, Buddhas, and Vajras. The Taoists didn't show any signs of weakness either. Countless enchantments rose, and various formations were densely packed. Monsters shook their heads and wagged their tails, while spiritual birds flapped their wings and soared high. As the path of Taishu was rarely cultivated by those with the body and spirit meridians, the Taoists who stayed here were more unified. Basically, all of them were orthodox Taoists. This was very beneficial in terms of coordination. 3 gigantic Buddha forms crashed into the enchantments of the Taoists. Behind them were countless Vajras. Demons subduing Buddhist weapons flew everywhere. It was as if an army of monks was marching. Under the intense collision, the two parties finally engaged in a head-on battle. Chapter 984. Lu Xiaoyi was not of much use in a battle of spells. He was a mobile player, not a stationary cannon. Hence, he retreated as he fought. He was not the only one who did this. In the midst of the battle, the Taoists did not have a backbone. Hence, no one came to criticize them and let them defend their position. In a battle of space, as long as there were people who dared to die, it would be difficult for there to be an unbreakable wall. Now, the core circle was mainly protected by enchantments. The items within the enchantments were destroyed under the aggressive attacks of the monks. The Taoists stood up again and were destroyed again. In this cycle, the monks pointed their weapons at the core circle. The Taoists who were scattered had 2 choices. They could either scatter to both sides to avoid the attack of the monks, or they could retreat and join their comrades behind them to continue resisting. Everyone had their own choices. Those who ran to both sides were not as timid as mice. This was related to everyone's specialties. For example, there were those who continued to fight even if they scattered to both sides. There were also those who retreated to defend but did not do anything. The defensive circle of the Taoists was shrinking. To the defending Taoists, it was their duty to do their best. Risking their lives was a little too much. 50 strands of yuanying, even if there was an overflow of people, it would not be so cheap. When 2 armies faced each other, momentum was the most important. One attacking and one defending, one group and one group. One was organized and the other was too unorganized. The final result was expected. Even the Taoist who paid a high price could not sit still. He had not completely fused and tamed the Taishu fragment. The impact of the fierce battle was right in front of him. No matter how determined he was, he would not be able to remain calm in such a situation, let alone comprehend the Taishu Dao. His emotions were in a mess. It was useless to do anything. He was also decisive. He stood up and joined the last defensive formation. At this moment, There were less than 30 Taoists in the core circle. They were on the verge of collapse. Lu Xiaoyi was the last few to retreat. He could reach the Taishu fragment in a flash, but he could not do so now. He could not snatch the fragment in front of his fellow Taoists. Gossip was a fearful thing. He did not care, but Xiaoyu might become the target of public criticism. Stealing without attracting attention in the midst of chaos and stealing in the open were two different concepts. At the same time, he wasn't sure if the monk's swastika would follow him when he made his move. This monk had always been at the front line of the monastic community, maintaining a subtle distance from him so that he did not dare to act rashly. What he wanted to bet on was the chaos that would ensue when the Taoist sect's defenses collapsed at the last moment, causing everyone to scatter and the monks to rush forward. The change was instantaneous. One of the Taoists could not withstand the huge psychological pressure and left first, which immediately caused a series of chain reactions. The Tao formation collapsed, and the people scattered in all directions. The monks swarmed in. Lu Xiaoyi and a few other Taoists escaped from the fragments, and when they were within the range of the peacock god moved and an unknown force was shot out. At the same time, Monk Yihang took a step forward and sent a dark swastika towards the fragment. Both of them were aiming for the fragments. This was just an illusion from a moment ago. A moment later, tens of thousands of rays of sword light suddenly bloomed and merged into a single sword, and its target was none other than Huang Yin. The peacock god had indeed appeared, but it was a fake one. At such a crucial moment, how could Lu Xiaoyi ignore his own safety and his powerful opponent and care about the external objects that he already had? At the same time that the sword light bloomed, a swastika rose from the bottom of Huang Yin's feet and spun rapidly upwards along his body. As it spun to the right, it seemed to carry a lifetime of Buddhist power. When it spun out from the top of his head, the suction force caused the surrounding space to become unstable and collapse. The dark swastika had indeed appeared, but it was an illusory one. Other than its appearance being the same as a real one, everything else was illusory. Yihang's goal was the same as Lu Xiaoyi's, to target the person and not the object. The swastika wheel and the combined sword collided right next to the fragment, and a stifling sound of thunder resounded. It was the collision of the Taoist and Buddhist powers that had been compressed to the extreme. The sword was destroyed, and the wheel was destroyed. Under the combined effect of the surging Taoist and Buddhist powers, the Taishu fragment flashed uncontrollably and flew out of the battle, disappearing into the deep void. Lu Xiaoyi's reaction was extremely fast. As soon as the fragment flew out, he began to move. He continuously pulled the stars with the greatest intensity to supplement his speed with the 5-element shift. He knew very well that he had lost the opportunity to kill the monk. Now that the Taoist power was scattered and he was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, he was at a disadvantage in terms of the number of people. Under the encirclement of the monks, how long could he wield his 3 axes? Since he couldn't get rid of the main target, he had to get rid of the secondary target. Therefore, he kept a close watch on the fragment. Although it flew fast, it couldn't escape the lock of his divine sense. Yihang's reaction wasn't slow either. He used the pure Yuanying stage teleportation technique. On the Lotus Throne, he flashed frequently without leaving a trace. Every time he teleported, he would travel about 100 miles. This was almost the limit of a bodhisattva. No matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than teleportation. This was determined by the rules. One was continuous movement in the space, the other was taking a shortcut from another space. They couldn't be compared. However, there was one thing that teleportation couldn't be compared to teleportation. Teleportation would never lose track of the target, as long as you could keep up. However, there was a huge problem with teleportation. When the end of the teleportation appeared, the cultivator had to redefine the position of the target. This was to prevent himself from going astray. Although the time limit of this divine sense was very short, it had a huge impact on the cultivator's movement. It was considered a discontinuous movement. The most terrible thing was that if one used teleportation to chase after the enemy, one had to consider the enemy's counterattack. Once the cultivator came out of the teleportation state, there would be a period of time of absent-mindedness. No matter how brilliant the cultivator was, he couldn't avoid it. It could only be said that it was infinitely reduced. If he was caught by the flying sword as soon as he appeared, he would die in vain. Therefore, Yi Hang's maximum teleportation distance was around 100 miles. However, he didn't dare to maintain the rhythm of teleportation at 100 miles. He could only teleport at 100 miles, 70 miles, 90 miles. The irregular teleportation distance would make the opponent unable to determine his next location. With these factors, although he was skilled in teleportation, his speed couldn't be compared to the swordsman who was constantly teleporting. The choice of method depended on the characteristics of the orthodoxy. The mainstream was teleportation, which was suitable for the cannons. They didn't have the ability to lock onto the target and cast spells while teleporting. However, those with the sword vein would choose to teleport without exception. They weren't willing to teleport because they couldn't hit anyone while they were teleporting. Due to various reasons, Yi Hang couldn't catch up to the swordsman. This was determined by the difference between their orthodoxies. It wasn't entirely a matter of strength. It was also because of this that Lu Xiaoyi had the confidence to collect the fragment. Chapter 985. Noticing the monk's teleportation behind him, Lu Xiaoyi sighed in his heart. He might not be able to kill this monk this time. He would not disregard his own safety just to kill his so-called opponent. The current situation was clear. If he deliberately looked for an opportunity to attack the monk who had teleported, the monk might not succeed, but he would definitely lose the trail of the fragment. In other words, he would definitely lose the opportunity to break through the unbounded space. Using an action that he had no confidence into exchange for an inevitable bad result. Considering the situation of the monks in this space and the danger of Senior Sister staying here for too long, he had no other choice. Before the monks could surround him and before the monk could use his swastika, the fragment that had gradually slowed down after flying for a period of time. After Lu Xiaoyi approached, the peacock deity flashed and the space shattered. Everyone returned to the waiting space. Immediately, Lu Xiaoyi scanned with his divine sense. Senior Sister was still there. This made him feel relieved. In any case, he was entrusted by others, and he did not let them down. Wandering in the universe, it was better to travel with Qing Xian or the slug. It was worry-free, and everyone had the ability to take care of themselves. Otherwise, he would act alone. He had come out to the universe several times. Once was Xia Bingji, and once was Kawa. Both Senior Sisters made his hands and feet tied. It was not fun at all. Just as he was about to go over and greet them, he suddenly felt the space around him changing. In the haze, he seemed to be in a separate space. There was also someone beside him, but he could not recognize him. Soon, the owner of this place let him know the answer. The two of you ignored the rules and took more. If the cultivation world is the same as you, wouldn't it be a mess? My cave realm of the ruins of End has its own rules and cannot be taken lightly. One great Tao fragment per person, no more. What do the two of you think? Although he knew that the two of them had extraordinary backgrounds, especially the one who played with swords, innate spiritual treasures had their own pride. They could be open, but they could not be killed. However, the basic rules had to be followed. Otherwise, they would not be able to stand on their own. Lu Xiaoyi cupped his hands towards the void. This disciple is a kind-hearted person and cannot bear to see the people in misery and suffering. That's why I snatched it away. It's just that I want to avoid unnecessary conflict and slaughter. The Buddhists are aggressive and want to use this opportunity to create a massacre. I ask that Senior Great Sovereign understand. Yi Hang was infuriated at the side. That was his line, but it was snatched away by this swordsman. This person's sword was fast, but he didn't expect his mouth to be fast as well. His mouth was full of lies. Please allow me to report, Great Monarch. Disciples' gains are not for myself, but for a friend. I don't want to kill too many people, so I'm willing to donate my gains to a friend. However, Sovereign, please keep it a secret and don't let anyone know that Disciple has the ability to seize the fragments. Abyss Sinkhole's true monarch praised. That's great. I'll give you a space where outsiders can't see you. If you have any rules, just tell me. As long as you give out the items, I won't pursue your hegemony. As he spoke, Yihang was moved away. A transparent ball of light appeared where the cultivators were gathered. The people inside could observe the outside, but the people outside could not see anything inside. Their facial features, auras, and orthodoxies were all isolated. Yihang was very happy because Abyss Sinkhole's true monarch had arranged for him to be in front. This way, he could better show the magnanimity of the Buddhists. He could use the Great Void Tao fragment to cause a rift in the Taoist sects. When it was the swordsman's turn, he could only copy the wisdom of others. The effect would be much worse. He had snatched 5 fragments, 3 of which were Great Void and 2 of which were Merit. The Merit fragment would obviously be left for his fellow disciples. The Great Void Tao fragment was the reason for the conflict between the Taoist sections. He would choose to gift it to those Taoist sects that were neutral in the conflict between the Taoist sections. Of course, such a thing wouldn't happen immediately, but as long as the seed was planted, it would take root and sprout one day. While he was sowing discord here, Abyss Sinkhole's true monarch was still calm in another space. Then what about you? How do you choose? Are you also a gift? The reason why he let the monk do it first was to send him away first. Only then would there be a possibility of favoritism. The poor monk Yihang thought that he had received preferential treatment from Abyss Sinkhole's great monarch. Just like what the monastery had told him before he entered, the Abyss Sinkhole's environment would develop in a direction that was beneficial to the Buddhists. However, he didn't know that the proud, great monarch in his heart was also a person who changed sides according to the wind. After knowing the roots of the swordsman, it was obvious which side he would lean towards. Lu Xiaoyi looked at the monk outside, who was still spouting nonsense. However, he wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to wait for the monk to finish gifting the fragments before acting. I'm still hesitating and need to think about it. Great monarch, please wait for a moment. Abyss Sinkhole's monarch obviously didn't mind. However, he still gave a kind reminder. I understand your intentions. Although you're a swordsman, you're compassionate and have a broad heart. Although you've killed, you've never lost your sincerity. Since you've received 2 more fragments than him, I won't bully you. How about this? To be fair, you can keep 1 more fragment. What do you think? Lu Xiaoyi was very puzzled. This great monarch was a little strange. In terms of killing, he had killed the most people inside. All right? Because of sincerity? What kind of reason was that? For a moment, he couldn't figure it out. Seeing that the monk outside had finished telling his story and that the fragments were mostly distributed, he didn't hesitate anymore. Thank you for your wise judgment, great monarch. It's just 12 fragments. If I can't divide them clearly, the powers in the surrounding domains won't say anything about me. I'm afraid that great monarch is unfair and stingy. I'll only take 1 fragment. That's what I deserve. The remaining 6 will be distributed. However, I have a small request. Abyss Sinkhole's monarch was very satisfied. This little fellow was very tactful. He even knew how to think for him. This was sensible. Speak. Lu Xiaoyi was a little shy. I also want to borrow a space where no one can see. I want to open an auction. Yihang didn't expose his identity. Under the premise of calling himself a benevolent Buddhist, he successfully gave away the 5 fragments. Needless to say, the 2 fragments of merit were naturally given to his senior and junior brothers. The key was the 3 fragments of the Great Void. He instigated a few Tao sects that had always been neutral to state their friendly relations with the Buddhists. Then, he chose 3 sects to give them away. This process was to deeply plant a thorn in the Taoist factions. He didn't expect these neutral Taoist sects to stand on the Buddhist side in the war between the Buddhists and Taoists. That was impossible. However, he could sow discord among the Taoists. That was his goal. The moment he finished, the cultivators counted with their fingers. There were still 4 fragments of merit and 3 fragments of the Grand Pure One. How would they be distributed? Would they still be Buddhist bodhisattvas? Or would they be Taoist yuanying? At that moment, another space appeared out of thin air. Still, everything inside couldn't be seen clearly. However, there was a banner hanging with a line of words on it. First Realm Abyss Sinkhole Auction. The Great Tao is priceless, but the Spiritium is. The highest bidder wins, honest to all. Chapter 986. Everyone was in an uproar. In this world, there was actually someone who openly sold Tao. Wasn't he afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens? However, now that the heavens were going downhill, it probably couldn't care about these details, right? Auctions were not a new thing in the cultivation world. Everyone was very familiar with it, and it was a good way to get resources. The only problem was, what was the price of Xiantian Dao? Had anyone bought it before? Among the hundreds of cultivators, only one was clear-headed, Kawa. She didn't even need to think. Just from the fearless tone of the banner, she knew who the profiteer inside was. Previously, the monk got 5 strands. It seemed like this guy got 7 strands. This wasn't strange at all. This guy had never been a person who would suffer losses. She didn't have any resentment in her heart. She just resented that this guy didn't leave anything for her. Opportunities and resources in the cultivation world were determined by the heavens. What right did she have to rely on her face to reap without sowing? Moreover, after the experience in the space, she had become indifferent to some things and was far from being as urgent as when she first came here. Although she was a woman, her arrogance didn't lose to others. Immediately after, a divine sense was transmitted into her mind. It was a familiar, unruly, and thick-skinned person. Senior sister, do me a favor. I'm still short of a shill here. I'm just waiting for you to raise the bid to build momentum. Kawa weakly transmitted her divine sense to that bubble space. No. When did I raise the bid? Isn't this a scam? Besides, I don't have much spiritual opportunity. I can't afford to raise the price. What if someone withdraws halfway? What should I do? That divine sense chuckled. I'm the one selling the goods. You're still afraid of not having enough spiritual opportunity? Just raise the bid. Raise the bid to death. Increase the momentum. Moreover, you must get the first strand. No matter how much spiritual opportunity there is, it can make a good start and raise the atmosphere. As for the transaction, what are you afraid of? Just give me an empty storage ring and then fuse the fragment in front of them. Kawa was speechless. This profiteer was really self-taught. As long as it was a bad thing, there wasn't anything this guy didn't know. He was digging a big hole to bury someone. The first auction item, Great Void Fragment. The 600 to 700 people present were dead silent. No one knew what price to bid. Was it reliable? Should the great sovereign of the ruins of Sinkhole stop him? Don't spend a lot of money, only to end up with nothing. Within the bubble space, a voice changer was still shouting, the Great Void Fragment. Take a look, take a look. Don't miss it. One of the 36 Khanate Masters. The true essence of Taoism lies in the Great Void. Selling price, vomiting blood, price drop. If he didn't make a move today, where else could he find one? After selling them, they went home to celebrate the new year. 3,000 pure jade spiritual opportunity, or the equivalent of purple purity, 100 plus. This is a rare opportunity, and the Great Tao is in sight. 3,000 clear jade spirit jades. This price was truly not expensive. Lu Xiaoyi and Xia Bingji went out for 10 years, and they both had a net worth of 5,000. Of course, that was under special circumstances. It was impossible for others to have such a big harvest in 10 years. But don't forget, which of the yuanying here hasn't drifted in the void of the universe for hundreds of years? In terms of wealth, there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Spiritual opportunity could be harvested, but where could the fragments of the Great Tao be harvested? If it was purely based on luck, one might not even meet 1 out of 1,000 people. Still, no one made a bid. Perhaps they also felt that it was too unreal. The Great Tao of buying and selling seemed unreliable no matter how one looked at it. Kawa's heart was tormented. If she raised her sign, it would be too embarrassing. If she couldn't raise it, she was also afraid that she would ruin the plans of the bad guys. She was truly in a dilemma. She wanted to wait for others to make a bid first before she looked at the situation, but now it seemed that she was being forced to make the first bid. She clenched her teeth, feeling awkward. If she were to mix with this fellow, she could forget about her face. Just as she was about to open her mouth, she didn't expect that an unfamiliar Taoist would finally take the first bite of the crab. 3,100 pure jade spirits. This was a cultivator from an unknown place. Compared to the major powers of the other regions, their chances of obtaining a fragment were even lower. Then, now was at least a chance. While everyone was still watching, he would take the first bite of the crab. If he succeeded, 3,000 pure jade spirits for a fragment would be the luckiest transaction in his life. In the worst-case scenario, losing 3,000 pure jade spirits would only be a loss of several decades of accumulation. This was the territory of the sinkhole Great Monarch. The Great Monarch hadn't made a statement, which could be tacit approval. Everyone wanted to see if the first transaction was real. This was his plan. The only thing he didn't consider was that in this world's auctions, while there could be no customers, there would never be a lack of shills. After waiting for a moment, just as the hammer was about to strike, a clear voice rang out. 4,000 pure jade spirits. It had to be said that Ka-Wa was still very talented at shilling. At this time, adding 100 would not show the preciousness of the great Tao fragment. The atmosphere had to be created, the kind of atmosphere where one would fight until one's head was broken and blood was spilled. Adding 100 would be too dull and lacking excitement. It would cause people to lose interest in participating. The Taoist was helpless. Things were going in a direction he didn't want to see the most. If the price was raised, his little bit of wealth might not be enough. Therefore, he had to do everything within his power to quickly crush the confidence of the competitors. He couldn't show any weakness by adding another 100. 5,000 pure jade spirits. The Taoist gritted his teeth. The atmosphere had finally risen. Without waiting for Ka-Wa to speak, another Yuanning from a large sect opened his mouth. 6,000 pure jade spirits. Cultivators didn't lack gambling. The reason why this Yuanning dared to bid was because he subconsciously believed that the two people in front of him must have some inside information. The auction wasn't a gimmick, but a real thing. Then 6,000 pure jade spirits for a great Tao fragment was still worth it. The price suddenly doubled from the starting price. This amount of pure jade spirits was something most cultivators present couldn't take out. If everyone relied on their own strength, the price would be about the same. However, there were still shills. There were still friends from the same sect to borrow. When everyone was in a deadlock for the second time, Ka-Wa, who was forced to do something beyond her ability, said extraordinary words. Since they had started playing, they might as well play to their heart's content. In any case, if something went wrong, that guy would cover for them. Women had a talent for shopping. Without a teacher, they knew how to overshadow their competitors. 8,000 pure jade spirits. The great void fragment is mine. If you don't agree, let's fight. Among the heroes, one woman stood at the pass. Her mouth was rude, and she was the only one. Was there anyone who didn't agree? Of course, there were, and there were quite a few. In the cultivation world, there would never be a lack of those low-key second and third-generation cultivators. They were usually inconspicuous, but when they opened their storage rings, they would blind you. 10,000 pure jade spirits. I want to see how the people from Zhou Xian take away this fragment. A Yuanning from the Dragon Slayer world shouted. The surrounding people from the same world cheered her on. Junior sister, that's enough. Are you smart enough? If not, the few of us can help you scrape together some. The other Yuanning from the Carefree Travel world naturally stood together. This was no longer a personal matter, but a matter of the sect's reputation. Although Ka-Wa's mother, Perfected Jia, was famous in the Carefree Travel world for being rich and overbearing, 10,000 pure jade spirits was still a huge number. It wasn't something an ordinary person could afford. Ka-Wa raised her eyebrows. No need. I can afford it. Chapter 987. After a few exchanges, Ka-Wa finally won the fragment with 18,000 spiritual opportunities. Under everyone's gaze, she walked to the front of the bubble space and pretended to hand in a few storage rings. Inside were all her belongings, more than 200 strands of jade purity. The person inside also pretended to count and waved his hand. With the help of the master of the ruins of End, another sealed space was opened. In the space, a fragment of the great void floated quietly. Ka-Wa stepped into it and went all out without any pressure. In a moment, the fragment of the great void turned into light and entered her head. There was no doubt. The fragment was real. The landlord, the master of the ruins of End, also supported it. All that was left was to fight. All the cultivators who were interested in this began to connect with each other. There was only one purpose: to borrow money. The competition had just begun. It was foreseeable that the low price of 18,000 would not be seen again. Some cultivators who had the strength but did not make a move began to regret. They missed the first time, but they did not want to miss the second time. Ka-Wa had started a bad precedent. This was the meaning of the existence of shills. It could push the atmosphere to a climax in the shortest time, unlike normal situations where people would slowly accumulate popularity. When the atmosphere was really up, the goods would be gone. The second item was the merit fragment. In view of the fact that the person in the bubble space was a detestable Taoist, the monks would not tolerate the merit fragment in the hands of a Taoist disciple. Monk Yi-Heng originally wanted to stop everyone from participating in the auction and let this farce end without a cause. However, the temple he was in was only a part of the nearby airspace. Even the strongest temple could not represent everyone. The bodhisattvas from other domains choked him back with one sentence: "Is your heavy mountain temple full? But you don't let others take a bite?" These words were very unpleasant, but he had to listen. It was obvious that if he had generously given the 2 merit shards to the monks outside his own temple, he might have been able to influence the monk's choice. However, since he had given the merit shards to his own people, how could he ask others to do the same? It was a dilemma. Who knew that this thing would come to this in the beginning? To deal with the lofty great Tao through vulgar business methods? The great Tao collapsed, and the cultured were no longer present. Instead, clowns came one after another. The monks were very supportive. In the world of cultivation, the orthodoxy of Buddhism had nothing to do with ascetic cultivation. It was a rich orthodoxy, both in the mortal world and in the world of cultivation. Buddhism seemed to be born with the talent of accumulating wealth. As for bodhisattvas and Buddhas, one could tell just by looking at their statues. Each of them had a fat head and big ears, just like the cooks. Wearing clothes, they were virtuous, and without clothes, they were fleshy. This was referring to the Buddhist sections. Usually, they would pretend to be people who saved people from suffering and were merciful and compassionate. They even wished they could put countless patches on their robes and call it the 100 patchwork robes. They would hold alms bowls and put on airs like beggars. If that was the case, then where did the huge temple property come from? Falling from the sky? In this aspect, the Taoists were much better. Usually, they looked noble and otherworldly. They were fastidious about their appearance and never got tired of eating good food. They seemed to be from big families and were wealthy. They did not care about the wealth in the world. In fact, most of them were paupers. There was one thing they had in common, and that was hypocrisy. What was faked was often not real. The moment the merit shard started bidding, it immediately revealed the unfathomable wealth of the Buddhist sects. The moment the first monk opened his mouth, it made the Taoists feel ashamed. 19,000 jade purity. Although there were no superfluous words, he had trampled Taoist Huazi under his feet from the start. The Taoist Khanate Great Tao was worthless, while the Buddhist Great Tao of Merit was the superior Tao. That was what it meant. Unconvinced, let the Spiritium battle. Following that, there was nothing for Ka-Wa to do. Shopping was most afraid of comparisons, of competing with one's wealth, and of being impulsive. Once an opening was made, there was no need to hold it up. It would climb up by itself. Everyone was happy. Those who were watching the show were not afraid of things blowing up. Of course, they were happy. Those who had the wealth to show off the strength of their own Tao teachings were also happy. Of course, the happiest person was a certain fellow who hid in a bubble space and did not dare to show his face. He was grinning from ear to ear. 25,000 jade purity spiritium was the answer that the monks handed over. This was the result of the internal competition within the Buddhist sections. Everyone had more or less restrained themselves, and it was not to the extent of drawing blood. If it was a fragment that could be used by Buddhists, then it would truly break through the heavens. With the template, the next step was to follow suit. The price could only be higher and not lower. Lu Xiaoyi kept a merit shard for himself for research purposes and basically gave Ka Wa shard for free. The remaining 5 shards were sold at the lowest price of 18,000 and the highest at 34,000. The total was close to 150,000 jade purity. This was a very terrifying number, but just from the value alone, it was not excessive. Spiritium had a price, but a great Tao was priceless. It could only be encountered by chance and not sought. It was also because everyone was not mentally prepared for this, so they did not bring much spiritium with them. If they had deliberately come from all over the universe to participate in the auction, they would have a lot of luggage. With the merchants stirring up trouble, even a shard could be sold for 150,000 spiritium. As long as it was a problem that could be solved with spiritium, it was not a problem. The universe was boundless, and there were countless wonders and resources. Yuanian cultivators could accumulate a considerable amount of resources even if they spent hundreds of years. Not to mention, they could also ask the seniors of their sects for help. This was a truly conscientious price. It would only be this time, and it would not be so easy the next time. Of course, Lu Xiaoyi had no choice. He could not bring it out, and he could not trade it. Moreover, the repercussions of exposing his identity were too great. He could not accept the debt of being in arrears. During the auction, there were cultivators who were willing to sign contracts and buy it at a high price. A single strand was worth more than 50,000. How would he dare to agree? If others were willing, he would not dare to go. The auction ended smoothly. After Lu Xiaoyi ate and drank to his heart's content, he did not forget to smear his opponent's name. The heavenly Tao is fair and observant. Every drink and every peck is simple in the heart. This poor Taoist seized the spiritium for Wuji. But firstly, it was to eliminate the boundless sin of killing. Secondly, it was not a selfish act. Selling everything I obtained was also a method. Unlike some people who hid things in the dark, shameless and shameless. They claimed to be righteous, but were actually despicable. The green mountains do not change, and the green waters flow forever. If there's a next time, we shall rekindle our friendship and drink together. These words were very vicious. It meant that he had sold all the fragments, but the previous monk had hidden some. Yi Hang had sold a total of 5 strands, 2 strands of merit and 3 strands of great void. That was all. He had sold 6 strands, 3 strands of merit and 3 strands of great void. But he had hidden a strand of merit. In the eyes of outsiders, there was a problem. Where did the last strand of merit fragment go? The Taoist must have left something useless behind, so it should not have been hidden by the later Taoist. Then who would have hidden it? Only the first monk was the most suspicious, playing the blame game. Among the 3 people who knew about it, needless to say, the instigator, the master of the ruins of End, was also tight-lipped. As for the victim, he could not speak of his suffering. Chapter 988. Yi Hang was in the crowd, but he could not say anything. What should he say? The reason why he asked for an independent space was because he did not want others to know that he had the ability to intercept Tao fragments in an instant. Once such an ability was exposed, even if it was exposed in his sect, there would be endless trouble. If it was said lightly, he would have to do the task of intercepting fragments in the future. If it was said heavily, it would arouse the jealousy of others, and his life would be in danger. Why, we can't even get a single strand, but you can snatch a few strands or dozens of strands. Could a fortuitous opportunity be seized like this? Cutting off one's opportunities is like killing one's parents. If this could be tolerated, what else could not? Not to mention Taoists, even Buddhists would be angry. So he could not explain, even if he knew that the bastard was talking nonsense and trying to divert the trouble. He could not stand up for himself. The most unclear thing was that he was missing a strand of merit fragment. This guy must have no use for keeping this thing. He deliberately did not sell it to disgust him. His intentions were terrible. I'm so angry. I'm not someone to be trifled with. Which world did that guy come from? Which power? He was not sure. The sword vein had inheritances in dozens of universes around, and there was no way to check them one by one. The only way was to look at a female cultivator among the group of Taoists with a gloomy look in his eyes. She was the one who ate the crab first. He was very sure that this woman was a fake. In other words, she had a very deep relationship with the swordsman. As long as he pulled this string, he would not be afraid that the swordsman would escape. He was very confident in his own strength. He had never met an opponent at the bodhisattva level. It was not just the problem of integrating a strand of merit fragment, but also the chain reaction caused by the integration of the fragments, which allowed him to luckily obtain some things from his previous life. It was mainly reflected in the application of the swastika. With the understanding of the swastika and his profound basic ability, no one at the bodhisattva yuanying level could enter his eyes. Playing mind games? He did not dare to say that he would definitely win. This bastard was indeed very cunning. Then he would compete with his strength openly. No matter how good that fellow's swordsmanship was, his understanding of the swastika from his previous life was not inferior to his. On top of that, there was a huge difference in their cultivation levels. What was there to be afraid of? After the auction ended, the entire place was in chaos. Some were happy, while others were sad. Everyone gathered in a messy space, waiting for the sinkhole Great Lord's orders to disperse them. Lu Xiaoyi blended into the crowd shyly, looking exactly like a loser. He couldn't be cocky. The most difficult part of successful act was how to wrap it up. He warned himself not to be blinded by the temporary gains. This was because he could clearly feel a gloomy gaze from the monks. How great was the hatred? How much resentment? Was there a need for this? Kawa receives the holy message. Meet up with Jinrenjia as soon as you get out and return at full speed. Don't wait for Xiaoyao. As long as you act fast, nothing will happen. That monk isn't that stupid. He might have already noticed you. Kawa did not refute. In terms of her sense of danger, she was far inferior to this guy. What about you? Lu Xiaoyi sneered. I'm the only one in the universe. Even if hundreds of monks come, it's useless. I'll play with them and let them know not to bully honest people in the future. Kawa was speechless. You're an honest person? Ear, that monk really hid the merit shard. Lu Xiaoyi, her. Kawa knew that her question was unnecessary. Flipping other people's tables after eating their fill was the nature of a hooligan. Everyone was still waiting for the sinkhole Great Lord's orders. This was also the fault of the Khanate spirit treasure after being alone for so many years. Usually, no one would talk to him, so this was the only chance for him to vent his hunger. But this time, it was a little different. There was no lecture, no appointment, and no warning. Space suddenly shattered, and the sinkhole space seamlessly merged with the normal void. Kawa scanned with her divine sense and found her mother's very special raft among the many waiting cultivators. The next moment, she had already entered it. Without waiting for her mother to speak, she had already set up the raft and fled. Mother, someone is chasing me. We need to leave at full speed. We can't stay. Perfected Jia felt the difference in her daughter and knew that she had succeeded. It was normal for her to attract some trouble. She took control of the raft, and this specially made flying weapon left a streak of light in the void. It was much faster than Kawa's. Don't rush. Speak slowly. The moment space shattered, everyone was still in a daze. Yihang had already locked onto the female cultivator and entered the waiting raft. Just as he was about to teleport over, he suddenly felt a warning in his heart. The swastika appeared and faced a sword light. A figure slid away in the air, and a frivolous voice sounded, "Here, to play hide and seek." When Yi Hang looked up again, the raft was long gone. He steeled his heart and chased after the figure. This evil creature, if he didn't kill him, it wouldn't be enough to appease the hatred in his heart. The collision of the sword light and the swastika caused another chaos in the air. The monk saw that there were Taoists around him and felt that it was dangerous, so he attacked first. The Taoists saw that the monk was not far away, so they suddenly shot arrows to vent their anger. In an instant, it was a mess. But in an open space, it was impossible to gather and fight. As they fought, they scattered, and their hearts flew away. It was a mess, and there was chicken feathers everywhere. It was like the melon seeds and fruit peels after a big play ended. It was a mess. The direction Lu Xiaoyi chose was opposite to the direction of Zhou Xian's upper world. It was beneficial for Kawa and her daughter to leave. But he wouldn't keep flying like this, or he wouldn't know what strange space he would fly to. When a space was opened, Yi Hang's teleportation began to show its power. Lu Xiaoyi couldn't get rid of him with his teleportation. Of course, he didn't really want to get rid of him. He just wanted to pull the monk out and leave the space where there were many monks. Only then would he have a chance to fight him alone. Several days later, in a desolate celestial phenomenon area, this place was still in the same universe as the ruins of Sinkhole's cave region. It was still 2 universes away from the immortal of Zhou Upper Realm. This was a relatively spacious region that Lu Xiaoyi could find in a short time. Spacious referred to the fact that this place was relatively far away from the nearest cultivation world, so it was rarely disturbed. Whether it was the Buddhist orthodoxy or the Taoist legacy, they were all fair. The universe that his interstellar map mapped was limited. The one he was most familiar with was the one in Zhou Xian's upper world. The surrounding universes were more vague and rough. For example, this space that was separated by 2 universes was a general indication of the most important cultivation world. It was impossible to be very detailed. A swordsman wouldn't reject a one-on-one challenge to solve a problem. He wasn't afraid of anyone in the same realm. Standing on a small meteorite, Lu Xiaoyi looked in one direction. A monk was walking over from the void. His face was no longer ferocious. He had completely controlled his emotions and adjusted the rhythm of the battle. He liked tough opponents. This was beneficial to his own improvement. Chapter 989. The monk stopped far away. He did not call for anyone. There was no need. Besides, he was worried that the swordsman would keep running if there were too many people around. The swordsman could not shake him off, but he could not stop the swordsman either. Both sides were in a dogfight that could not be separated. You should not lie to others. This is not the way of cultivation. Yi Hang regained his composure. There was no hurry. They had plenty of time. Besides, he could see that the swordsman intended to have showdown with him. Since both sides were interested, this battle would be easy to fight. Lu Xiaoyi was not in a hurry. There was no chance of a sneak attack. This was a fair and square battle. There were no tricks. Let's not talk about moral high ground, shall we? I'm lying, you're sowing discord. Who's more noble than the other? We're all experienced cultivators. Let's talk about something more practical. Yi Hang did not comment. I'm Yi Hang of the Great Mountain Temple. I want to settle this with you. I don't want to involve others. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. I'm Lone Ear, the carefree wanderer. If you want to fight, then let's fight. Yi Hang seemed to understand something. Zhou Xian is from the upper realm. It's a large world. I've interacted with a Taoist from Taishan before. Do you know him? The swordsmen have been watching him since they were in the Wei Ji space. There must be a reason. Now it seemed that he was standing up for his friend. He was very confident. Lu Xiaoyi did not deny it. It's mainly because I've heard that Master's Buddhist teachings are unparalleled. If I don't experience it, I'll be ashamed of myself as a sword cultivator. Yi Hang smiled. The swordsman is happy to hear the battle. I'm very impressed. However, my Buddhist teachings are not something that ordinary people can see. Lu Xiaoyi did not care. I like to see things that I can't see. I've lived to this day. Things that I can't see have become things that I can't live on. Yi Hang stretched out his hand. If that's the case, please. Lu Xiaoyi's figure blurred. Thousands of sword lights shot out from his body. Yi Hang's fighting style could only be described with one word: tit for tat. This was the fundamental change he had made to himself after accepting part of the memories from his previous life. It was also the in-depth application of the swastika seal from the half-immortal vision that allowed him, who was originally at the level of an ordinary bodhisattva, to stand out and become one of the strongest combat forces in the dozens of universes near the bodhisattva level. Yi Hang didn't stay in one spot either. Instead, he moved freely. His entire body, with his heart as the center, was like the central axis of the swastika wheel. His entire body was bathed in the swastika wheel, emitting light in all directions. He was like a reincarnated Buddha. Defense is the key to success, radiating light in all directions. The attack was done in the dark, without a sound. It was like a giant swastika spinning in the void of the universe. As it spun, the swastika would shoot out countless smaller swastikas to attack the opponent. This was a Buddhist secret technique that was both offensive and defensive. It was also the great Dharma protector that Yi Hang had abandoned all other dharmas and focused solely on for 100 years. In the Fuji space, both of them had clashed once. Outside the ultimate space, both of them fought once more. In the former, both of them tested each other's strength, while in the latter, they tested each other's casting speed. Both of them were far above average. This was also the reason why both of them viewed each other as strong enemies. Now, both of them were facing each other for the third time. The battle had expanded to a deeper level. It was a contest of control, a contest of subtlety, a contest of changes, a contest of insight, a contest of Tao realm, a contest of decisiveness. It wasn't as earth-shattering as the first clash. That was because Lu Xiaoyi had used all his strength in that sneak attack. He couldn't sustain such intensity for long. It was similar to the state of the previous few axes. Similarly, Yi Hang had completely given up on defense and focused all his energy on taking advantage of the chaos to kill the swordsman. Such an attack could be used once in a sneak attack, but it couldn't be used continuously in a real battle. Without the protection of the giant swastika wheel, facing an opponent like the swordsman who had fast attacks was tantamount to suicide. Both of them were attacking with all their strength under normal conditions, which gave the battle a foundation to continue. Since Lu Xiaoyi didn't have the confidence to continuously attack and destroy the swastika wheel, he naturally wouldn't be so foolish as to waste his mana and let the opponent chase after him. One had to look at the opponent before attacking with 3 axes. The sword rays became more and more rapid. Tens of thousands of sword rays formed a 5-elemental light whirlpool in the void. The changing 5-elemental Tao realm made the spinning sword blades unpredictable. In the past, he still needed the cooperation of the 5 sword spirits to achieve this. But now, Qi, Yi, and the sword ray division were enough. This was the way the inner sword roared in the universe. There was no need to worry about whether the flying sword would be damaged or whether it would be contaminated by the Buddhist power. This allowed the sword to be unbridled under the sword's light. He could use his imagination to his heart's content and didn't have to be constrained by the fixed changes of his moves. For example, when the 5-elemental sword formation couldn't penetrate deep into the opponent's swastika wheel, the 5-elemental sword formation stopped abruptly. Following that, the flying swords changed into a 5-elemental all, changing from a thrust to a single point. Yi Hang wouldn't foolishly wait there for him to test his moves. His body was like a light wheel. There was no way to advance or retreat. He watched from the front and watched from the back. It was very difficult for the flying swords to gather on his body for a long time. When he felt that it was necessary, he would even teleport himself out of the battle and attack again. It was exactly the same as Lu Xiaoyi's way of wielding his sword. While Lu Xiaoyi was attacking his opponent, he was also being chased by his opponent's swastika wheel. The key was how to deal with the Tao realm of merit. Seeing one's nature was merit. Equality was merit. Thinking without stagnation. Common nature. True use. It was called merit. seeing Buddha's nature being equal in heart, purifying oneself. This was called merit. Therefore, merit was closely related to the level of cultivation of Buddhism. In other words, this monk's understanding of Buddhism was unique. It was a little similar to the preaching of the 10,000 Buddha temple, seeing the power of Buddha in silence. However, wasn't this monk Yihang a little too much? The study of Buddhism was truly a boring thing. It took time, patience, and mind. Only those who could endure loneliness and wholeheartedly work in the Buddhist world could truly achieve something. If you only thought about how to win in battle, your Tao realm of merit would not be perfect. It sounded very contradictory, but in the world of Buddhism and Taoism, such contradictions were everywhere. If one wanted to increase their strength, their Tao realm would deviate, especially the great Tao of emptiness. It was different from the practical great Tao of the 5 elements. If one didn't want to deviate, one couldn't rely on one's Tao realm achievement in combat ability. Only when it happened to be the right time would it occasionally reveal a bit of brilliance. In the quietest nirvana realm, settle down. Everything has feelings, and even the first in the previous life. In other words, everything with feelings is the most victorious. That was why it was said to live in the sanctuary, to be able to stay away from 10 kinds of mistakes, and to be able to settle down in the sanctuary. It was called merit. Simply put, it was to achieve, settle down, and undergo nirvana that was the most victorious merit. From this, it could also be seen that merit was directed out of the world. Then, with this Yihang's various actions in the origin deity realm, he was clearly not that kind of person who could patiently study hard. How could such a person achieve such achievements in the Tao of merit? Lu Xiaoyi could not understand. Chapter 990. Those who wish to obtain merit should stay far away. To obtain merit, one should stay far away from happiness, worries, delusions, and greed. Monk Yihang didn't stay far away from any of them, yet his merit was still immeasurable. It wasn't that Lu Xiaoyi had to compete with merit, but that he couldn't avoid it in both offense and defense. Merit was one of 5 virtues. It had a great ability to manifest mysteries and eliminate other Tao realms. Of course, it was ultimately a competition of the depth of understanding of their respective great Taos. Obviously, Lu Xiaoyi's 5 elements Tao realm couldn't compare to this monk's merit Tao realm. Therefore, his 5 elements ability couldn't achieve anything in front of Yihang. What he found strange was that this monk's attainments in merit had completely exceeded the scope of a bodhisattva. He didn't know much about Buddhism and didn't know what tricks were involved. In that case, he would change to another Tao realm. The great Tao of massacre. This was the most primitive, instinctive, and bloody great Tao of humans. It was also the most hidden impulse that was deeply rooted in everyone's heart. However, some people could easily uncover it, while others needed to be bullied, forced, and oppressed to the brink of death to awaken it. The power of Buddhism was the most effective orthodoxy against the great Tao of massacre. On the other hand, the great Tao of massacre was a blade hanging over Buddha's head. It was a competition of who was more profound. Murderous intent rose as the sword light became sharper. As the two of them rolled, they fought their way out of this region of space. Neither of them could control the specific direction they were heading in. This was because they had to consider their own safety first. Where to escape to and where to teleport to was the safest. Penetration point, combo, converging, splitting, leading, and so on. Lu Xiaoyi used almost all of his unconstrained sword techniques, except for the sword of ambush. This was because he knew that as long as that huge swastika kept spinning, any ambush would be meaningless. However, under merit, the Tao realm couldn't be broken through. Therefore, he changed to the stars. Relatively speaking, the postnatal Tao of stars performed better in front of merit. Firstly, it was because of Lu Xiaoyi's familiarity. Secondly, it was because of the Tao of stars. It was only slightly better, but it couldn't change the foundation. Of the 3,000 weak waters, only one can drink. This was not an empty phrase. It was the first time Lu Xiaoyi was suppressed by someone using the state of Tao in a battle. In the past, he was always the one suppressing others. Qin Xin must have been defeated under such circumstances because of the suppression of the Tao state of yin-yang. This was not a pointless test. He was only choosing the most suitable combination among the various Tao realms. Lu Xiaoyi's ability was not purely relying on a Tao realm to suppress others, although he had been acting like this all along. The essence of a battle was to give the opponent a false impression. It was a kind of performance art. Needless to say, any good opponent would be able to sense it. The Tao of concentration lies in essence, while the Tao of breadth lies in fusion. How to combine a few completely different, mutually exclusive and unrelated Tao states, naturally, through swordsmanship. That was the ability of a true expert. Lu Xiaoyi did not dare to say that he was outstanding in this aspect, but he had some experience. This was his last trump card. It needed to be combined with a few violent outbursts of the axe to achieve the best effect. He could not use it now, because the combination of the Tao states required him to see through the opponent's merit weakness. For example, which Tao state was the best to use for the wand wheel's breakthrough? Which Tao state was the most suitable for the rotation of the wheel spokes? How could the wheel's hub be penetrated? Of course, it was best to use one sword to break 10 techniques, but the prerequisite was that the sword had to be sharp enough. It had to be strong enough. If it could not be done, he could only work on the details. He had not met such a difficult opponent for a long time. Now that he thought about it, Qin Xin was only injured by the monk and did not die. The Taoist must have held back in front of him. There were no good people in the 3 pure ones. After more than 10 days, he finally had some understanding of the monk's Tao state of merit in the depth of the wand wheel. After all, a bodhisattva was still a bodhisattva, not a Buddha. No matter how deep his understanding of merit was, it was limited by his own cultivation state. How could it be perfect? With some ideas, the combination was gradually taking shape. Now, he was just waiting for the right opportunity. Who was Yihang? He had fought countless battles in his life. How would he give his swordsman such a long time to test him? This guy was really too difficult to deal with. His 10,000 words wheel imprint was one of the fastest Buddhist techniques. This advantage allowed him to have the upper hand against other Buddhist or Taoist Dharma cultivators. In addition, his light will was not restricted to its usual form. Basically, he was the only one who could hit others, and others could not hit him. However, these advantages were not enough in front of the swordsman. The flying sword was faster than the wand wheel. The stars were more agile than the rotation of his light wheel. His advantage against Dharma cultivators became a disadvantage against the swordsman. Of course, this was an exception. He had killed many swordsmen before, but they were not as fast as this swordsman. They were also not as bold and unconstrained as the swordsman on his sword. This swordsman's flying sword was no longer just a sword. It was more like a cultivator's body. He could control it as he wished, and the sword and man were one. There were no flaws. What puzzled him the most was that in these 10 days of battle, there had never been a problem with his cultivation. This was not in line with his realm. He could not figure out the reason. This made him lose his patience. He was very clear that if he continued fighting like this, he would still be in this awkward situation even if he fought for another year. His greatest advantage in being invincible was not his cultivation, but his profound transcendence energy. Although this sword cultivator's transcendence energy was not profound enough, his application of transcendence energy was top-notch. Who knew how he managed to send out those endless flying swords? His advantage lay in his overwhelming knowledge of the Tao realm of karma. This was from the memories of his awakening. He did not think that he had used a trick. The power of his previous life was also power, and it was also his. His opponent's various Tao realm powers were unable to gain an advantage over him. This gave him the opportunity to set up his trap. As one of the 5 virtues, the Tao of karma was top-notch in terms of transformation, dissipation, and defense. However, it lacked sharpness in terms of offense. This was a characteristic of the Tao itself. Just like how lightning, massacre, and destruction were strong in offense, but weak in defense. The balance between the five elements and yin and yang, and how karma and creation were strong in defense, but weak in offense. These were unchangeable unless you change your Tao. However, no matter how weak it was, it still had its own means of offense. From the start of the battle, Yi Hang had been preparing for his ultimate move. At first, he was just being cautious. He believed that he could defeat this person under normal circumstances. However, as time passed, the chances of him winning using normal means became slimmer and slimmer. In that case, his backup plan became his last hope. That was boundless charity. Chapter 991. Giving alms without any form meant that when giving alms, there was no one who could give alms. The person who received the alms and the things that were given would, of course, not have the thought of asking for anything in return after giving alms. This kind of merit, given by the emptiness of the three chakras, was the greatest merit. Doing good deeds without asking for anything in return was called giving alms without form. Giving alms for the sake of fame, for the sake of profit, for fear of falling into the evil path, or even for the sake of one's own health and well-being was called giving alms with form. It was a limited merit. Giving alms without asking for any benefits, regardless of the cost, and regardless of whether there was a reward or not, and completely for the sake of other people's needs was called giving alms without form. The merit of giving alms without form was limitless. Giving alms without form was the true essence of Buddhism, the core and the soul. It was the brightest pearl on the crown of Buddhism. It was the origin of all techniques, the root of all mysteries, and the origin of all forms. It was reflected in the battle when there was no attack, the person who was attacked, and the method of attack. Of course, after the attack, there was no need to ask for the effect of the attack. It sounded a little self-deceiving, but this was the strongest attack of Buddhism. Without desire, it was firm. Without attack, it was subdued. Was there really no attack? In the eyes of the monks, of course, it was like that. How could it be considered as attacking you when I poured Buddhism into your body? I was helping you, right? Helping you to realize your mistake, helping you to repent, helping you to rein in the horse at the edge of the cliff, helping you to repent and be saved. This was the attack without attack in Buddhism. One could imagine what would happen if this kind of attack was poured into a Taoist body. Hundreds of years of Tao foundation would be destroyed overnight. Humans would not die. But to practitioners, it was worse than death, because you would start to want to shave your head and become a monk. Giving alms without form was a very profound, non-combat combat method in Buddhism. Even the Buddhas found it difficult to master. Not only did it require talent, but also wisdom. Yi Hang's previous life also only mastered this kind of giving when he entered the late stage of half-immortal. Of course, now that he had awakened it in his next life's reincarnation, it was definitely not as perfect. It might not be possible to give alms without form, but it was still possible to give alms without form. In the end, it was very difficult for the Bodhisattva realm to reach the level of Bodhi half-immortal. This was not something that could be achieved simply by awakening part of one's memories. The awakening of Yi Hang was an individual phenomenon. It was not within the normal range. It was due to the secret technique of his previous life, the flash of inspiration when he fused with the merit shard, and the blessing of some kind of fate. It was already a great blessing to be able to reach this step. In the end, it was impossible for him to truly obtain the complete power of the Bodhi half-immortal with the body of a Bodhisattva. It was more than enough to deal with yuanying. To him, in his previous life, the non-reciprocal charity was just a matter of a single thought. But to him now, even if he was not fully familiar with the non-reciprocal charity or half-reciprocal charity, it would still require him to constantly work hard. From the beginning of the battle until now, more than 10 days later, he had to constantly strengthen his non-reciprocal charity concept of non-reciprocal charity. Only then did he barely meet the requirements to perform this secret technique. It wasn't complete yet. There was still a bit more to go. This was the process of incessant visualization and incessant self-suggestion. The process of infinitely diluting the opponent, ignoring the conflict between the two of them, throwing away the hatred, and only treating the opponent as a target that could be influenced. This was the preparation stage to perform the non-reciprocal charity. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to achieve this in a battle. He had to hypnotize himself without attacking and entangle himself with the opponent without letting the opponent see through his abnormality. This caused the monk Yihang to feel a little schizophrenic. Fortunately, it was finally close to completion. The only thing missing was a catalyst. In his previous life, when he was the Bodhi half-immortal, of course, it was not so troublesome. He could use it whenever he wanted. Why would he need a catalyst? But now it was not possible. Since it was a half-reciprocal charity, then he had the body that could not be attacked and the receptor that could not be attacked. As an offensive method that could not be attacked, if it was to exist, there would need to be an observer to bear witness to it. It was like doing a good deed. He did not ask for anything in return, nor did he ask for fame. Therefore, he could only secretly achieve his intention through a third party. It was to establish a chastity in front of a prostitute. He was relatively familiar with this space, at least more familiar than Lu Xiaoyi. Therefore, he knew that there was a very close place that could meet his requirements. He could find a most suitable third party, and it was a third party that did not belong to humans. This was the best sounding board for the non-reciprocal charity. His voice was loud enough, he did not think, and it did not belong to the scope of human karma. Lu Xiaoyi entered a complicated space in this rhythm of probing. With his combat experience, of course, he could see that the monk was doing this on purpose. But he had his own views on the so-called complicated space environment. This was the confidence that he had gained from wandering the void of the universe for countless years. If he wanted to break the balance and find a chance to win, he needed change. If he did not follow, change would never appear. He also did not want to fight with people in an unclear way forever. The key was that there was not much fun in fighting. What he liked was the adventure of life and death in a chase. It was the best display of tactics and adaptability, the kind that could make people's blood boil. It was not like now, where the monk used an unexpected and incomprehensible Tao realm to make the battle dull. Of course, he would not completely follow the monk's wishes. Dafa cooperated, and Xiaofeng deliberately messed around. In this entanglement, the two rolled into a cluster of star vortexes. During the contact, Lu Xiaoyi acutely felt the change. His flying sword was slowly taking the initiative. From 4 to 6 attacks 10 days ago, it slowly developed into a mutual attack and defense. And now, it was 6 attacks and defense. For a battle expert like him, this kind of change did not make sense. His flying sword could not cause any substantial damage to the monk. The monk's cultivation was far above his, and he had rich combat experience. The two of them did not even try an explosive attack combination. Even a rabbit would kick twice before it died, let alone a human, who would allow themselves to slowly fall into a disadvantageous position without any struggle. The virtuous Tao realm was still stable as before. There was only one explanation for this situation. The monk was preparing his trump card. Lu Xiaoyi's battle habits were that when his opponent was preparing their trump card, he would retreat from the battle. After his opponent was depressed, he would return to attack. This was also the swordsman's way of doing things. It was the essence of sword manipulation. The purpose of sword manipulation was never to clash head-on with the opponent's trump card. But there were no absolutes in this world. For example, how could this monk not know that Lu Xiaoyi was also preparing his trump card? If both of them chose to avoid the opponent's trump card, then this battle would never end. The key was that after avoiding the opponent's trump card and returning to attack, he did not have an effective solution. Taking a risk was the only choice. Swordsman was not afraid of taking risks, as long as there was a chance of success. He was confident that he could unleash his trump card before the opponent's trump card. This kind of unique tactic of forcing back the opponent's trump card was the tactic of a true expert, because he firmly believed that his sword was faster than the opponent's swastika. Chapter 992. The star vortex group was a huge funnel-shaped celestial phenomenon formed by hundreds of small planets. Every planet in the funnel rotated in a fixed direction and at a fixed speed, carrying countless asteroids of various sizes. Under normal circumstances, a cultivator would have to be very careful in such an environment, not to mention moving at high speed during a battle. It was a test of the cultivator's overall strength. Perfect control of oneself, the enemy, the environment, and the large and small meteorites. Both of them were able to do this. While fighting, their bodies drifted in the chaotic star vortex. Not only could they move freely, they could also effectively use the meteorites to block the opponent's attacks. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Originally, he wanted to put in more effort in such an environment and see if he could use the complicated environment to launch an explosive attack in advance. In the end, after a few exchanges, he realized that the monk's performance was perfect. Obviously, the monk had his own understanding of how to move freely in a complicated environment and was not weaker than him. He could only wait for the moment when both sides could accept the decisive battle. There was also a small change. In this star vortex group, there were traces of cultivators. They were not humans, but demonic beasts. Vaguely, there were a few Yuanying-level demonic beasts poking their heads out from afar, but none of them actually appeared in the vicinity. This was in line with the reality of the universe's cultivation world. The status of demonic beasts was far lower than that of humans. This made them try their best not to fight with humans in the void of the universe. It was also a way to protect themselves. Of course, this did not include ancient beasts. However, ancient beasts would not appear in places where human cultivators flourished. They had other places to live and would try their best to stay away from human territory. The cowardice of demonic beasts made Monk Yihang very depressed. Couldn't they be more generous? Would it kill them to come and take a look? But there was only one demonic beast that came over, so where did this third-party medium that he was giving out half of his gifts come from? Since they did not come, he would go and find them. Although he had never been to this area before, he knew it from the star map that it belonged to a demonic beast domain. It could barely be regarded as an upper-class domain, but it was not suitable for human habitation because it was located in a group of star vortexes. The fast spinning speed was not something that the human body could withstand. Without a place for mortals to live, there was no cultivation inheritance. In the end, this place was occupied by demonic beasts. The human cultivation world also turned a blind eye to it, and let it be. This was a very suitable place. Monarch-level demonic beasts were extremely rare, giving him enough space to unleash his power without being disturbed. In fact, there was only one realm in the group of vortexes that was a cultivation environment. Because the rotation speed was extremely fast, everything here was in a hurry. The change between day and night would be completed within 2 hours. Not only would it affect living creatures, but it would also affect plants. Therefore, the plants here were different from those in normal cultivation realms. They could only survive by adapting. The plants here had automatically completed the process of adaptation, and so did the demonic beasts. They had long been used to it. On the contrary, they would feel uncomfortable if they went to a normal cultivation world. In the face of the appearance of human cultivators, most of the demonic beasts held an indifferent attitude. They would not join any side. That was the path to disaster. In the long years of cultivation, the cruel history had already taught them this point. But there were always accidents. There were always curious ones. There were always beginner Yuanying who did not know the dangers of the cultivation world. If a beginner Yuanying had a strong curiosity, something would definitely happen. The great immortal Nyo Li hummed a little tune as he flew outside the realm. Great Immortal was the title that the little ones on the mountain called him. He closed the door and talked to himself. Of course, he did not dare to call himself that outside. But in the area where he was active, he could ride the clouds and fog, summon the wind and rain, and enter and leave the blue sky. Wasn't that the ability of a great immortal? He flew outside the realm not because he wanted to travel in the universe. Even if he did not have much experience with the blood and tears of countless senior demonic beasts, he would not wander around in the void after just a few decades of forming his nascent soul. Even if he flew close to the surface of the realm, he was only rushing to another mountain in the realm to congratulate an old friend. Originally, he could just fly within the realm at this distance. But first, he had just formed his nascent soul not long ago and was still full of yearning for the void of the universe. Second, he wanted to show off his ability in front of his underlings. So he directly flew out of the realm. In fact, he did not fly very far. Once he left the realm, he began to fly close to the realm. He could also experience the vastness of the void of the universe. The distance was actually very close. He had just flown out of the realm and was about to fall when an extremely dangerous collision of spiritual vigor came from not far away. It scared the great immortal Nioli so much that he did not know what to do. His experience was still a little lacking. If it were any other familiar or slightly knowledgeable demonic beast here, it would immediately choose to escape into the chi layer without hesitation, because this was clearly a battle between two powerful existences, and it was not something that a mere demonic beast could just sit back and watch. However, great immortal Neo Li had just reached the stage of Yuanying, so it was still a little confused about the situation. It had never come into contact with human cultivators before, so it did not know that this kind of battle fluctuation was not something that could be caused by demonic beasts. It wanted to take a closer look. In any case, it was close to the atmosphere and could escape at any time. Just as it was hesitating, two humans appeared in its sight. One of them had a Buddha aura and a swastika wheel that made it dizzy. The other one had a sword aura and a flying sword that made it tremble in fear. If he wanted to turn around and slip away, how could it be too late? While Lu Xiaoyi was entangled with the two of them, he suddenly felt the 10,000-word wheel on the monk's body turn dark. He knew that this was a sign. Without hesitation, the sword light above his head was like a huge river. Previously, there were no more than 3,000 to 5,000 sword lights. But now, there were tens of thousands of sword lights. This was the largest form of sword light he could achieve at the moment. The Tao realm was the star realm. The Tao realm of the star realm would help him break through the 10,000-word wheel's cutting edge. Then, he would change the Tao realm to the 5 elements to deal with the spinning of the wheel spokes. Then, he would use the Lux Slash to break the protection of merit. Finally, he would use the Tao of Massacre to attack the hub of the wheel, which was the monk's body. Changing the Tao realm 4 times consecutively in the instant the flying sword came into contact with the opponent was an extremely difficult operation. Not only did it require a deep understanding of the Tao realm, it also required the realm of one with the sword. More importantly, it tested the strength of the flying sword's sword spirit. There were very few swordsmen who could achieve this in the stage of Yuanying, especially when the flying sword came into contact with the monk's body 4 times consecutively. Lu Xiaoyi was able to do this because he had worked hard for hundreds of years. Almost at the same time, a swastika that emitted a gentle glow spun towards him. Its speed was ordinary, its power was ordinary, and its momentum was ordinary. Lu Xiaoyi did not choose to dodge. He had a feeling that this thing could not be avoided, so he could only intercept it with his sword aura. After more than 10 days of battle, he had already understood the power of this thing very well. He knew how many flying swords were needed to stop it. For this reason, he had already prepared a countermeasure among the tens of thousands of sword lights he had sent out. Thousands of sword lights and the swastika passed through. What Lu Xiaoyi did not expect was that the intercepting of the flying swords did not have any effect on this gentle 10,000-word wheel. It was as if it was just a virtual image of a swastika without any substance. It could not be a feint. Chapter 993. In the blink of an eye, Lu Xiaoyi was faced with 2 choices. Should he give up on attacking and focus on defending against this strange 10,000-word wheel? Or should he continue attacking? The ferocity of a sword cultivator was vividly displayed on his body at this moment. He couldn't defend because he still didn't know how to defend himself. Thousands of sword rays seemed to hit nothing when they passed through, as if they didn't exist at all. Would 10,000 sword rays be effective? In a desperate situation, he threw his last few hundred sword rays into the attack. He was completely defenseless now. However, his flying swords would arrive before the 10,000-word wheel. It was a competition of who was more ruthless. Would the monk withdraw his wheel, or would he withdraw his sword? The swordsman only had one choice. Both of them were ruthless enough. Yi Hang was shocked to see the swordsman, who had always been cautious, completely disregard his own safety in this attack. It was as if he was going to die together with his opponent. He wouldn't withdraw his wheel either. Although most of his karmic power was on the 10,000-word wheel, he still believed that his slightly dimmed wheel would still be able to block the flying swords. Even if the flying swords were faster and denser this time, as long as he clenched his teeth and held on, the swordsman's defenseless body wouldn't be able to dodge the formless charity. As for him, he would at most suffer some ordinary injuries. If the swordsman dared to fight, so did he. Just as Lu Xiaoyi expected, his flying swords arrived first. Under the full force of his stellar Tao, they broke through the 10,000-word wheel's blade and instantly changed into the 5-elemental wheel. Their power didn't diminish even as they collided with the 10,000-word wheel. Yi Hang could feel that the swordsman's sword was different from the others. The complicated changes in his Tao successfully broke through the 10,000-word wheel that he was so proud of. However, he couldn't withdraw his attack now. Not only him, but also the swordsman. Neither of them could withdraw their attacks. Withdrawing meant death. He still had the will hub. He still had karmic power. However, Yi Hang's last hope was completely destroyed by the luck severing. The wheel hub, which had temporarily lost the protection of merit, was shattered by the eruption of the great Tao of slaughter. It was also at this moment that the swastika seal firmly imprinted itself into Lu Xiaoyi's body. Both sides suffered great losses. Yi Hang felt that the sword qi in his body was piercing his heart like thousands of arrows, mercilessly wreaking havoc. The 5 elemental stars intertwined with each other, and the changes didn't stop for a single moment. His meridians, acupoints, muscles, and bones were minced into pieces. Even the power of merit could not help him for the time being. However, he still possessed the basic abilities of a cultivator, even if this ability was not even 1/100th of what it was at his peak. A lotus platform popped out on its own. The petals opened and wrapped around him before closing seamlessly. At the same time, light and shadow intertwined. The color of the lotus slowly faded and distorted. Under a vague spatial force, it gradually disappeared. It was unknown which dimensional space it had gone to, and it could no longer be found. It was a bit like Xia Bingji's space silkworm chrysalis, but of a much higher level. This was the safest way. Who knew what kind of trouble he would encounter if he stayed here? Humans and monsters, when he was intact, everyone would stay away from him. But what about when he lost his ability to defend himself? Who could guarantee that others would not have bad intentions? This was the last means of self-protection for the monks of the Heavy Mountain Temple. It was a treasure that the senior monks took from the lotus seeds of the 9 Songs Buddhist lotus. After countless procedures and numerous sacrificial refinements, it could completely seal the space and maintain a relatively undisturbed state in order to help the monks recover. The injury was very serious, very serious. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never suffered such a serious injury. However, he was still very satisfied. No matter how serious the injury was, he could slowly recover with time. The power of the Tao state was not worth mentioning because the power of merit was endless. He would eventually be able to completely dissolve it one day. As for the body, it was just a trivial matter among the various injuries. The key was the opponent. He had completely received the alms of the swastika seal. Then, what would be the situation of the swordsman now? How long would it take for him to abandon the Tao and pray to Buddha? He really wanted to see it with his own eyes. Unfortunately, this was the only thing he was not satisfied with. He could not see the opponent struggling in pain and helplessness. A Taoist who had cultivated for 700 years was now covered in the power of merit and faith. It must be very interesting. However, although he could not see it, he could feel it through the connection of merit. This was the only fun he had in the Lotus platform. Lu Xiaoyi looked unscathed from the outside. However, only he knew the situation inside his body the best. The power of merit and faith had instantly destroyed the system of Taoist techniques that he had cultivated for 700 years. The only thing left was the peacock god space in his sea of consciousness. If the peacock god space was also conquered, he, who was covered in merit, would have to become a monk even if he did not want to. This was a matter for the future. All he could do now was to use the peacock god space as a final resistance. He could not care about anything else for the time being. He did not have the Lotus platform, nor did he have the meticulous backup plan that the monks had. He could no longer control his body and could only go with the flow. Would he be a floating corpse in the void, or would he fall into the bounded domain? Would those demonic beasts watching from afar want to eat Tang Sanzang's flesh? On the surface, it looked like both sides were injured, but in reality, he had lost. He could not kill the monk. That damn power of merit had stopped his Tao state from wreaking havoc. Although it would take a long time to completely remove it, as long as he could stabilize it and prevent it from worsening, there would be a day when he would recover. But what about him? He did not even have a relatively safe environment for healing. He did not have any effective healing methods. He was helpless against someone who had a higher level of merit and Tao state than him, unless his Tao state was stronger than the monk's merit. But how could it be improved so easily? He was afraid that before he could improve it to a sufficient level, he would have to submit to Buddha. Lu Xiaoyi immersed the only bit of mental strength that he could control into the peacock god space and left the rest to heaven's will. This battle let him know that there was always someone better than him. It was a good thing for him. It helped to correct his mentality that was becoming more and more unruly. But did he still have the chance to correct it? What was extreme joy begetting sorrow? This was extreme joy begetting sorrow. He had just swept away 150,000 spiritual opportunity from Origin Deity Realm, and now he had to pay the price for such evil deeds. This was Heavenly Tao's reincarnation. Lu Xiaoyi returned his consciousness to the sea of consciousness, to the Peacock Palace. He seemed to have become that big-bellied old crow. As his wings flapped, he tried his best to resist the power of merit that was surging over like a tide. There were golden Buddhas, lotus bodhisattvas, arhats and monks, endless believers, a beautiful afterlife, Buddhist words of warning, fresh flowers falling, and Sanskrit sounds faintly discernible. It was as if an incomparably peaceful and auspicious enormous Buddhist kingdom was pressing over, wanting to accept him, assimilate him, fuse with him. His future was bright. He flapped his wings that were becoming heavier and heavier, absolutely not giving up on his resistance. Chapter 994. Great deity Nyo Li was trembling with fear as he watched from the side. It was as if he had just walked through the gates of hell. Regardless of whether it was the swastika or the winding river flying sword, even if there were 10 of him, he would still be smashed to pieces. But in fact, it was only a short moment. When Yi Hang saw it, he was afraid that it would run away, so he immediately used formless charity without any hesitation. Then, he perished together with it in an instant. There wasn't even a collision of spiritual vigor, because the swastika was a virtual seal of virtue and couldn't be affected by external forces. The other spies who were watching from afar couldn't determine what was going on. Why did the originally normal rhythm of the battle suddenly end? Out of fear, they didn't dare to immediately come over to take a look. But great deity Nyo Li saw it clearly. 2 powerful human cultivators were injured. One used a secret technique to escape, and the other was unconscious. Then what should it do? Under normal circumstances, an experienced demonic beast would continue to observe, unwilling to get involved in this sudden karma. Once they were involved, No matter which power behind the human came looking for them, it was not something that demonic beasts like them could contend against. Although this place was called the Cultivation Upper Realm, it didn't live up to its name. There were few true monarchs, and there was no heaven and earth barrier. What could it use to stop an invasion? But it was also greedy. This was a demonic beast's instinct. The human swordsman definitely had countless resources on him, and the hesitant demonic beasts in the distance were all testing its demonic heart. Should it bravely take a bite, or should it pretend to be a passerby and leave? If it lived for a few hundred years, it might choose to pretend that it didn't see anything, but right now, it was like a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of tigers. The opportunity was already at its mouth. How could it just let it go? Without making a sound, he transformed into his original form. He was a big and strong yellow ox with his head lowered and his hooves stampeded. He rushed over and carried the sword cultivator on his back. His huge body had already descended into the chi layer with the speed of lightning. Only after a long time did those spies finally rush over. Looking at the clean void, there were no traces of a fight, nor were there any signs of Tao disappearing. Naturally, they assumed that the two humans had flown somewhere else. As for where they went, no one knew. Even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to chase after them. Great immortal Nyo Li carried the human and descended rapidly in the atmosphere. His mind was filled with thoughts. Of course, it would not eat this human. There were no benefits, and there was no temptation that eating a cultivator would be a great supplement. After cultivating for thousands of years, it understood all too well that cultivation was about the little things that happened every day and not about swallowing an immortal pill in one gulp. Furthermore, he had heard from his fellow clansmen that human flesh was not delicious. I heard that creatures that are too scheming don't even taste good. The spoils of war had been snatched, but how to use them had become a problem. It was impossible to kill him. It was clearly the monk's sin. No matter how stupid it was, it knew that it couldn't be the one to take the blame. However, even though the swordsman had a lot of storage rings, each and every one of them had profound restrictions placed on them. Even though he was as strong as an ox, yes, he was an ox in the first place, his brain was very small compared to the rest of the demonic beasts. Using his physical body to fight was his forte, but using his brain would cause him headaches. After being impulsive, there would be a lot of trouble. Should they save him or not? How to save him? Should he take it or not? How to take it? If this person woke up in the end, what should it say to prove that it was the savior of the swordsman? If this person died, would it be tainted with karma? It heard that humans were all heartless and ungrateful people who repay kindness with enmity. If the swordsman woke up, it really wouldn't be able to defeat him. What if it was slaughtered and made into marinated beef by him? Its meat was famous for being delicious. It was a proper snowflake meat with a balance of fat and lean. It was said that humans loved to eat this. All kinds of trivial matters made the simple-minded Nyoli feel that its small brain was about to be turned into mush. It couldn't think of a perfect plan, not even a half-perfect one. Only then did it remember the purpose of its trip here. Well, it was originally here to meet a friend and congratulate him on taking in his 9th concubine. However, it was so overwhelmed by this brainless change that it completely forgot about its original purpose. At this moment, an idea suddenly popped into its mind. Let it have an epiphany. Well, its friend was a loyal one. Before it reached the nascent soul stage, he had given it a lot of help. The two of them had been friends for thousands of years. More importantly, its friend was different from itself. He had been to the human world and had seen the world before. It came empty-handed this time and didn't bring any gifts. Why not offer this human as a present? The two of them could be divided into 5 parts. In the future, if there was any karma, there would be one more person to help it. It was a really good idea. Nyoli thought it through and turned into a gust of demonic wind. Under the black clouds, no one could see what it was carrying on its back. Although it was crude, it was still cautious at the very least. After flying for a short while, it arrived at a dangerous mountain. It didn't have a name. Demonic beasts didn't have a hobby of naming things. Anyway, whoever occupied this place would call it whatever mountain it was. Therefore, this place was now called Pig Head Mountain, just like how its own cave was called Ox Head Mountain. Its master's cave was in the middle of the mountain peak. From afar, it could see many small demons busily working below. Of course, there were no lanterns or decorations like humans, and they didn't know how to do that. There were only big fish and big meat, and all kinds of fruit wine spread out outside the cave. There were hundreds of big and small demons. Some were at the gene dance stage, but most were at the foundation establishment stage and chi refining stage. It was very prosperous. This was also something that Neoli admired. Its Oxhead Mountain wasn't so harmonious. It fought all day long, and they ate each other's food. However, it didn't have the beast veins that its second brother had. He ate all the big and small beasts, and beasts came and went. This was also a skill. Those who had been to the human world and had been plated with gold were indeed different. When its demonic wind fell, the big and small demons weren't afraid. Knowing that it was a regular, they walked diligently and knelt down to pay their respects. Greetings, Grandpa Nyo. Good luck to Grandpa Nyo. Great deity, Neoli enjoyed it very much. Look at how polite it was. It was much better than its own place. Sensing the aura, it knew that it wasn't the only guest in the cave. Its second brother had traveled widely and had many friends. It couldn't compare to him. However, it was second brother's best brother. This was different from the other yuaniing big demons. He was familiar with second brother's cave like it was his own house. He came here too many times, but he didn't go to see the master. Instead, he ran to the back of the cave. There were many demons, and if they knew too much, it wouldn't be easy to share. Great deity, Neoli was rough, but there were times when he was calculative. How could he carry the spoils of war to the main hall and let more people see it? The back of the cave was where second brother's family lived. Ordinary friends wouldn't come here, so it was much safer. After a few turns, a charming rabbit demon walked out from the side. She bowed and smiled. Third uncle is here? Why didn't you go to the front to see the king? Why did you come to the back instead? Could it be that you're here to steal the king's wine again? As she spoke, she winked flirtatiously. This was the rabbit demon's nature. It wasn't that she wanted to seduce this third uncle. With the rabbit demon's petite body, it was already very difficult for it to deal with the king of pigs, let alone third Uncle Nyo. If they really did it, wouldn't it be like a Tonghulu? Chapter 995. Mountain Boar was in the main hall, receiving guests from the south and north, when he suddenly received a sneaky message from Brother Nyo. After experiencing the Taipu realm, he obtained the Taipu ancient spirit and gained more knowledge. The way of heaven also relaxed the standards of the upper realm, so it didn't take long for him to successfully become a Yuaniing. In the desolate world of Silu, he could be considered a big shot. His horizons were broadened, and he had seen enough, so he handled things differently for demons. The most important thing was that it was slowly awakening the memories of its previous life. It finally understood its true origins. It understood what it was searching for in its 10 reincarnations. Every time it reincarnated, this memory would become more profound and clearer. In its dozens of previous lives, except for most of the cases where it died before reaching the nascent soul stage, it finally died on the way to the universe to find its senior brother after reaching the nascent soul stage several times. If it died, it would reincarnate. When it became a Yuaniing, it would go out to find him. This cycle had never stopped. It also knew that its senior brother's hometown was in the fifth ring in the blue sky realm, but he might not be able to reincarnate there now. In any case, it firmly believed that since it could reincarnate endlessly and regain its memories, there was no reason that its senior brother couldn't do the same. No matter what others said, it held on to this point and never gave up. What said to Gu and the little black dragon back then was not a joke. The wild boar believed in one thing, and that was that it would not turn back even if it hit a wall. There were two problems. First, it didn't know where its senior brother had reincarnated to. What was his current state? Secondly, Its terrible cultivation realm and strength caused every trip it took to the universe to become a disaster. It was eaten by void beasts and killed by cultivators. However, this still couldn't change its original heart. The wild boar had such a stubborn temper. It had no friends, and the few that it had were just a bunch of bad friends. They couldn't be of any help. Because of its roots, it would never have any backing. It would forever be a lonely pig. Before it regained its memory, it could still happily eat and wait for death. After it regained its memory, nothing in this world could attract it anymore, until it stepped into the universe alone, drifting alone, searching aimlessly until it was killed by someone. In a wild boar, being killed and reincarnated seemed to be an effortless journey. It believed that one day, under the guidance of the heavenly Tao, it would get its wish. It did not want to think too much about other things. For example, why was it a pig every time it was reincarnated? Why was it that other people's memories of reincarnation would become fainter and fainter, but it would become stronger and stronger? None of this was important. What was important was what it should do. This time, after becoming a nascent soul, its memory was restored as usual. It began to prepare for a long journey again. It was very clear that once it stepped into the void of the universe, it would never be able to return here. Therefore, it spent more than 100 years here to improve its strength, consolidate its cultivation, and prepare its luggage. Of course, it also found a few more secretaries and a nest of rabbits. In its plan, within 100 years, it would once again walk into the universe and carry out its unique tragedy. Regarding this point, it had reincarnated so many times, but it had never mentioned it to anyone. This was the most sacred thing in its heart, and also the only guarantee that it could find its senior brother. If it said it out loud, it would not work. Luck would not be there. Because of the memories of several lifetimes, his way of dealing with the world was completely different from those vulgar fellows. In the eyes of brothers like Great Immortal Ox, this kind of performance was innate wisdom and a great future. But they would never know that it was precisely because of its innate wisdom that it died earlier than other demon cultivators of the same realm, dying without any complaints or regrets in its search. When it was drunk, it had to enjoy itself to the fullest. When it woke up, it had to scatter. It never accumulated resources and fought Dafa, so it had a lot of friends. Other demon cultivators thought that it was such a worldly character, but only it knew that it was useless to accumulate resources. Anyway, it would die in the void of the universe sooner or later. When Great Immortal Neo, Li's divine sense, transmitted over, Wild Boar's expression did not change. It ordered the servants to bring up good wine and good meat, and accompany the guests for a round before it excused itself and left. The next moment, it came to the cave of its fourth concubine. The old bull at the door had a vigilant look and 2 horns on its head, as if it was ready to fight at any time. Wild Boar laughed. "Third brother Nyo, what are you doing? You're not drinking in front, but sneaking around behind." Great Immortal Nyo grabbed Wild Boar's hoof. "Second brother, I have something good. Today, I specially brought it over to share with second brother. Come with me." Wild Boar was dragged into its secretary's cave by Great Immortal Nyo. As soon as it saw the human figure sitting cross-legged, it was as if it was struck by lightning, as if it was immobilized. It couldn't move, couldn't speak, and could only cry out 2 lines of blood from its 2 big pig eye sockets. This scared Great Immortal Neo quite a bit. He slapped the pig's spine, pinched its middle, and blamed himself. "Second brother, what's wrong with you? Are you blaming this little brother for bringing an unrelated person over? Are you afraid of trouble? It's okay. This has nothing to do with second brother. I'll carry him away myself, and definitely won't implicate second brother." Great Immortal Neo Li also felt strange. Its words were actually probing. It understood its second brother very well. If he was still ordinary when he was in Jin Dan, then once he became a nascent soul, he really changed completely. He even led the brothers to do a few big things and was unparalleled. Second brother was usually very bold, so why did he suddenly? There must be a reason. Wild Boar finally calmed down. It was crying and laughing, but it suppressed its voice and kept humming. It pulled the old bull. Third brother, today's second brother owes you a huge favor. Do you know who this person is? Do you still remember the story of the Tai Pu realm that I told you? Great immortal Neo immediately reacted and covered the bull's mouth. It can't be so coincidental, right? This is the person who helped second brother in the Tai Pu realm. And what ear is it again? One ear. He's my benefactor. Third brother, you saved him. So you're also my benefactor. Wild Boar bowed its head, causing great immortal Neo to panic. It hurriedly helped it up and complained. Second brother, what are you saying? What kind of benefactor was this? We're all brothers. He helped you, which means he helped me. Everyone helps each other. So how can it be so clear? Wild Boar forced itself to calm down. Of course, this was not as simple as a benefactor, but the reason behind this could not be spread to a third person's ears, and even a second person could not know. At this moment, Wild Boar's mind had never been so clear. It knew that the choice it made now would affect its life. There were still many things that it did not completely understand, but its intuition could not be wrong, and there might be some small mistakes, so what was the big deal? Third brother, you need to tell us everything that happened exactly as it happened. You can't leave out anything. If we do it well, we'll have a great opportunity. If we don't, there might be big trouble. You also know that once we're tainted by human cultivators, there are many things that we can't control. Chapter 996. Pighead Mountain was immersed in joy. To monsters, happiness was always so simple. Their battle might be more bloody, but it did not involve much. It was not as complicated as the battle between humans. Wild Boar used private matters as an excuse to guard Fourth Concubine's cave. Under its tyrannical orders, the few people who knew about it, no, the few monsters, were restricted from entering and leaving. They were imprisoned in a hidden place in the cave, including its fourth secretary. They were under the surveillance of its divine since the entire time. It did not know who its senior brother's enemy was. It only knew that it was a monk. This was reasonable. When it followed its senior brother in the interior heaven, its main enemy was also a monk. This was an unavoidable feud, so it was not strange at all. It needed to make a decision. Should it leave its senior brother here, or change to a safer place where no one knew about it, including Old Ox? It could not make any mistakes. Pighead Mountain looked prosperous, but was also a sieve. It could not hide anything. It did not care before because it had nothing to hide, but it was different now. Its senior brother had not woken up and did not have the ability to protect himself. It could only rely on it now. It did not allow itself to make any mistakes. Will the monk still come? Silu, would the other monsters come after hearing the news? It needed to consider everything. Was Single Ear the name of its senior brother in this life? Or was it fake? Its senior brother was very cunning, but it did not matter. It was fine as long as he was right. Was he its senior brother? It was not sure. It did not have powerful magic power or divine abilities like his senior brother's friends. It was just a demon pig whose cultivation base was no higher than nascent soul. All of its judgments came from the intuition of a demon, and it did not have any accurate evidence to prove its judgment. But it believed in itself. Just like in the Tai Pu realm, its senior brother did not recognize it, but he saved it without hesitation. There was a mysterious connection, which was fate. Was it not enough to have fate? It was the swordsman. There was fate. There was a feeling, powerful enough, causing trouble. That was enough. No matter whether he was its senior brother or not, it would just treat him as its senior brother. As for the rest, it would leave it to time. As long as it followed its senior brother, there would be a day when the truth would be revealed. Senior brother definitely can't recognize it now. According to the rules of the cultivation world, a reincarnated cultivator must reach the realm of his previous life before he can recover his memory. Senior brother's realm was a bit high when he died. However, it did not doubt that senior brother could reach that realm. Of course he could. He definitely could. Who is senior brother? He was a golden immortal who dared to poke a hole in the sky. If he couldn't do it, no one in the cultivation world could. Wild Boar knew that its current goal was to live well. Even if it couldn't keep up with Senior Brother, it would be good to just watch. He didn't need to go to the void of the universe to throw his life away. He could live a good life while hugging someone's leg. This was its greatest wish, a wish that had lasted for more than 10 lifetimes. In this lifetime, its dream had finally come true. I can't die again. Otherwise, who knows where I'll reincarnate next time? How could he be as lucky as he was now? The universe was nothing to Senior Brother, but it was nothing to Old Pig. It really couldn't fly. As for whether or not Senior Brother could survive this ordeal, it had never considered this question. It didn't even consider how it could help Senior Brother. For a main character of cultivation like Senior Brother, wasn't every injury a prelude to a great increase in strength? That's what the story said. What's there to worry about? Wild Boar began to laugh foolishly. Its thoughts wandered a little. If it followed Senior Brother to a domain with more spiritual vigor, would it be better to bring a few secretaries? Bring all of them? Or pick a few of the most coquettish ones? If the secretaries were unwilling to leave here, would it follow Senior Brother? Or stay? Senior Brother was good in everything, but he loved to cause trouble. It was too dangerous to follow him. Others couldn't do anything to him with his abilities, but Old Pig couldn't stand it. Or stay here and watch silently. Take care of the secretaries silently. Thinking of the beautiful life in the future, Wild Boar couldn't help but drool. However, it was suddenly awakened by the noise in the hall. It was its bad friends who couldn't help themselves after drinking too much. This brought it back to reality. No, this place was too noisy. It had to change to a safer place. A crafty rabbit had 3 burrows. When it was in the interior heaven, it had the habit of leaving a secret passage for itself. Now that it had married 9 secretaries, and each secretary had 3 burrows, 9 would be 27 burrows. There were many places, and no one could find it. This was the confidence that had built its foundation here for several hundred years. When it thought of it, it acted immediately. While the demonic beasts were stuffing themselves, Wild Boar carried Senior Brother and quietly left Pig Head Mountain, disappearing into the vast mountains. When it recovered the memories of its previous life, its former identity as a demonic builder allowed it to possess a cunning and meticulousness that was not inferior to humans. It had reincarnated for over 10,000 years and didn't want to wait for another 10,000 years. Moreover, once you wasted your luck once, you wouldn't be able to wait for a second time. Although Wild Boar, who had spent time in the interior heaven, didn't have a high cultivation level, his insight and knowledge were top-notch. At that time, Senior Brother's friends were all first severance and second severance, and there were half-immortals among them. After settling down Senior Brother in the most secretive cave, it wasn't worried at all about how Senior Brother had woken up. Maybe Senior Brother was now circulating his inner secrets to a higher level. As for medicinal pills, was Senior Brother someone who needed medicinal pills? Too vulgar. It was very clear about Senior Brother's attitude towards medicinal pills. Previously, when it wanted to take some pills in the interior heaven, it was scolded badly, so it probably wouldn't use them himself. Moreover, it didn't have any medicinal pills. Have you ever seen a demonic beast that needed to take medicine when it was injured? It was all shouldered by itself. The more it shouldered, the better. Of course, if it couldn't, then everything would be over. In its heart, Senior Brother was omnipotent. Just give him a little light, and he'd be able to light up, and he'd be able to live as long as he was planted in the ground. What it had to consider were external factors. That was how it was written in novels. Danger always came from the side, including those scoundrel friends of his, the small demons under him, and the 9 secretaries. It couldn't let them ruin things for him. It did what it could do. It couldn't interfere with Senior Brother's matters, and if it made a mistake, it would be beaten up. Lu Xiaoyi didn't know that the person who saved him had so many thoughts. Now he had completely lost his perception of the external environment and couldn't even sit cross-legged normally. His current posture was still being leaned against the wall by the Wild Boar with rods on both sides. It wasn't important anymore. The important thing was that he really needed external stimulation now. Swordsman didn't rely on external objects, but it didn't mean that he didn't need them at all. Under normal circumstances, if there were alternatives, he would try his best not to use external objects. However, under certain circumstances, external objects were very important. Everything in the world had its own uses. Man was the spirit of all things, and he couldn't do without the support of other spiritual objects. This wasn't an external path, but a true path. Otherwise, the real world of cultivation should be full of naked people with nothing else. Now, he needed the help of external objects. Even if it was a pill, a drop of water, or the input of other people's spiritual opportunity. Chapter 997. The Buddhist kingdom illuminated by the great Tao of merit surged forward, burrowing into every opening it could find. This was the specialty of the innate great Tao. The so-called collapse of the great Tao did not mean that the great Tao was gone and the merit would cease to exist. It meant that the Tao-fusing golden immortal could no longer control the great Tao, causing the great Tao to collapse. Just like a building built by an architect was destroyed by an accident after countless years of baptism. No one knew if the architect was dead or not, but when the building collapsed, the bricks and stones were still there. The foundation that was rooted in the ground was still there. If another architect picked up the bricks and stones, he might be able to find some new materials elsewhere and build a new house, which was another Tao-fusing golden immortal. In the process of the house collapsing, in the days of ruins, the bricks and stones were still there, and the meaning of the wood and stones were still indispensable to the construction. The only thing missing was a template, a standard. Just like Yi Hang's great Tao of merit, it still contained a considerable amount of power, but this power was not recognized by the highest level. Most importantly, Liu Xiaoyi was not at the highest level. Thus, he did not have the ability to deny the great Tao of merit. There would be flaws. The problem was whether he could find it. In the sparrow god's dimension, the wings of the big-bellied crow flapped slower and slower. This was the pressure brought to him by the great Tao of merit. He knew very well that if he continued to resist passively, he would not be able to last for long. The power of merit was endless. Through the unseen channels, it was constantly replenishing and strengthening. This was the most fatal thing. And the few great Tao he left in the monk's body were rootless. Without the support of his Tao state, they would only become weaker and weaker. This was the power of the top application of the great Tao of merit. It was not that the five-element slaughter could not do this. The five-elemental slaughter Tao was an unbroken innate Tao. Of course, they could do this. Cultivators could use the ubiquitous five-elemental slaughter Tao in the universe to replenish the consumed five-elemental slaughter Tao. But the problem was that Liu Xiaoyi had yet to understand it to that extent. Currently, most of Yi Hang's energy was still focused on using his own power of virtues to counteract the five elemental slaughtering stars. As the five elemental powers in his body grew weaker and weaker, he would be able to increase his investment in Liu Xiaoyi's cultivation. In other words, he actually didn't have unlimited time to think of a solution. He had to find a solution before Yi Hang was free. Otherwise, the longer he waited, the lower the possibility of a comeback. He had already thought of a way, which was to use external stimuli to divert the attention of the power of merit and open up a second battlefield. Then, the sparrow deity would counterattack and expel the power of merit. This was because he could no longer control his own body. His entire mind was completely immersed in defending against the merits. If he wanted to control his body, he would need to invest a certain amount of mental energy to control his body that was currently occupied by the merits. He could not afford to invest this amount of mental energy. He was afraid that even if he managed to regain control of his body, he would lose the sparrow god space. That would be a real loss. Therefore, he was looking forward to external stimulation, no matter what kind of stimulation it was. Pills, artifacts, and spiritual vigor. Even if someone came to kill him now, The magic power that penetrated into his body would be of great help to him. But the depressing thing was that there was nothing. He would either be saved by someone and fed them pills and spiritual vigor, or be killed by someone and force entered his body. This was also the reason why he decisively put all his mental energy into the sparrow god space when he was injured. He knew that there were demonic beasts spying on him. After the battle, there would definitely be demonic beasts coming to clean up the battlefield. No matter if it was good or bad, it was an opportunity for him. But what was going on now? No one was helping him, and no one was killing him. He was just quietly placed in a place, and then no one cared about him. This situation could be pardoned in the mortal world, but in the cultivation world, where demonic beasts roamed freely, he was treated like this. He really couldn't understand it. Where was everyone? Where were the demonic beasts? Where the F***CK did they all die to? Of course, he didn't know that there was someone who worshipped him and didn't care about his situation at all. He thought that there was no problem in the universe that he couldn't solve. Therefore, he was worshipped here like a bodhisattva and didn't even give him a stick of incense or a bowl of water. There was no need. Senior brother was climbing to new heights. That was how it was described in the novels. After waiting for a while, he knew that he couldn't pin his hopes on external stimuli anymore. Since there wasn't any in the beginning, the chances would be even slimmer in the future. He had to completely rely on himself. Time waits for no man. He had to rush before Yi Hang recovered. Being forced to this point, he actually had no other choice. Since resistance would be broken sooner or later, he could only take advantage of the fact that he still had some power in the sparrow god space to let some of the power of merit attack in. Since he couldn't reject it, he could only enjoy it and merge with it. He placed his hopes on his experience of being invaded by Buddhist power, and he placed his hopes on the fragment of merit. It was very risky, because he was a complete layman when it came to Dharma. If he let the world of merit in, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was a difficult challenge to find a loophole in Yi Hang's realm of merit in a short time. His chance was to obtain the fragment of the great path of merit. That was the true great path of merit. He didn't know anything about merit, but he knew how to compare. If he compared the fake with the real thing, he would naturally know which was better and which was worse. This was a secret battle of time, eyesight, recovery, and luck. If he won and found the weakness of Yi Hang's merit, he wouldn't be controlled by this monk anymore. This monk wouldn't dare to appear in front of him again, let alone hand him his claws. If he lost, there was no need to say anything. He wouldn't even have the chance to be a monk because Yi Hang wouldn't allow him to continue living in this world. This method was very risky because he placed his hopes in a field that he wasn't familiar with, but he had no other choice. Who asked him to be in such a strange environment? A strange environment where no one cared about him. Lu Xiaoyi had always been a decisive person. After thinking through the twists and turns, he didn't hesitate and directly opened a small gap in the sparrow god space, allowing some of the merit that had almost filled the space outside to pour in. Fortunately, he acted early. Although the wings of the big-bellied crow were getting smaller and smaller, they were still strong. When the merit poured in, it didn't break through the dam and maintained a limited gap. But this wouldn't last long. If he couldn't find a loophole in Yi Hang's merit, the gap would become bigger and bigger. In the end, the dam would collapse and he would die. Chapter 998. In his sea of consciousness, in the sparrow god space, the seven-ant sword spirit began to attack Yi Hang's great path of virtue and the shard of virtue at the same time. He could observe the differences between the two great paths of virtue through their reactions. It had to be said that the Heavy Mountain Temple, as a true Buddhist sect, had the purest Buddhist teachings. Under the sword spirit's attack, the reactions of the two great paths of virtue were almost identical. Even if there was a slight difference, it was just a small difference under the same main theme. It didn't affect the overall situation. The sword spirit's attack became faster and faster. Lu Xiaoyi knew that only by forcing out the deeper aspects of the great path of virtue would he have a chance to find Yi Hang's loophole. Some superficial things didn't mean anything. Once he made up his mind, he couldn't give up halfway. He had to persevere. That was his philosophy. In fact, he didn't have a second choice. If Yi Hang's great path of virtue was perfect to the point that it was exactly the same as the shard of virtue, or if he couldn't force out the difference even after trying his best, then he would die without a doubt. The cave he was in was an extremely secluded place. It was full of twists and turns, and there were countless traps. Perhaps these traps couldn't deal with experienced human explorers, but if they were used to deal with the native demonic beasts of the Silu Desolate world, they would definitely crush them in terms of intelligence. Not to mention large demonic beasts. Even an ant wouldn't be able to crawl in. The wild boar used all his strength to build this safe house, but it caused Lu Xiaoyi to fall into a life-and-death struggle. This was also fate. Lu Xiaoyi could feel that his spiritual energy was gradually weakening in the peacock god space. If it were anyone else, they would have succumbed to Yi Hang's formless charity in a matter of minutes. However, even though Lu Xiaoyi's spiritual energy was unparalleled, it would still be worn out under the pressure of the Tao realm. In the extra-dimensional space, Yi Hang, who was healing himself and dispelling the Tao realm energy of the five elements, smiled. This swordsman's spiritual energy was so strong that it surprised him. After persevering for so long, he even had the intention to give up on his own treatment and increase the distribution of Yi Hang's great path of virtue. However, due to his strong confidence in great path of virtue, he still maintained his original rhythm, because recovering oneself was equally important. Once he regained his strength, he could choose to go to the deserted world of Silu to deal with the swordsman. With the help of the power of merit, hiding would be meaningless. Therefore, he actually had two choices. Merit defeated him. Karma would hold him back and then destroy him physically. Now he felt hope. Although he still didn't know what exactly happened to the swordsman, he knew that there was a flaw in the swordsman's final fortress. It was just a matter of time. After all, it was inappropriate for him to personally rush to the deserted world of Silu. It would be unbecoming of him as an eminent monk. At their level, the fight should be held thousands of miles away, or even in different dimensions. Only then could the power of the Buddha be displayed. They could do it without shedding any blood. Yi Hang let out a sigh of relief. This swordsman was too difficult to deal with. Lu Xiaoyi did not let his guard down. Even though his spiritual energy in the sparrow god space had dropped below the warning level, he did not stop Sword Ant from attacking the two great path of virtue. The swordsman's resistance was not only shown to his enemies, but also to himself, even if it meant death. He had to fight without hesitation and never back down. The sword spirit attacks would only become stronger, but he would never give up just because he was close to failure. The swordsman would never give up. Just as Lu Xiaoyi's spiritual power weakened due to the excessive use of the sword spirit's attacks, the old crow's wings flapped weakly, revealing a larger gap to allow more power of merit to pour in. Lu Xiaoyi's desperate sword spirit attack finally took effect. Due to the fact that Nightingale's merit and the fragment's merit came from the same source, their responses to attacks were almost identical most of the time. Under the frenzied attacks of the sword spirit's 17 ant, both of them chose the same response, non-reciprocal giving. Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. He finally found the flaw in Yi Hang's plan. Great path of virtue. How could there be a great path of virtue in this world? Either it was wholeheartedly not asking for anything in return, or it was purposely asking for something in return. There was no middle ground at all. Asking for something in return was asking for something in return. You can't say that a meal's worth is less than a city's worth. This was a conceptual problem, and there was no quantitative difference. Therefore, great path of virtue was blasphemy against Buddha's will. It was not a problem of perfection, but a fundamental problem of principle. The rest of the matter was much simpler. Although he knew the fatal flaw of Yi Hang's merit, he did not know how to use this flaw to destroy it. But it did not matter. There was someone here who wanted to destroy the blasphemous merit even more than him, and that was the merit fragment. As the purest power of merit between heaven and earth that had once reached the Tao integration stage, the nomological laws contained within the fragment did not tolerate other great Taoists the most. What it could not tolerate the most was the distortion and blasphemy of merit. Therefore, Lu Xiaoyi could only watch from the sidelines and see how pure merit dissected Yi Hang's merit. Before the matter was resolved, it was extremely difficult and complicated. But if you looked in the right direction, it was actually the easiest thing to do. Just like Lu Xiaoyi now, he was learning how to dissect merit without blinking. Only those with true merit would understand merit the best. Therefore, the merit law within the fragment was extremely sharp. This had nothing to do with merit. No matter how much merit Yi Hang had produced, it was still a group of concubines, second wives, and dowry. And what they had to face was the first wife. If the great path of merit had not collapsed, this process would have been reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. Now that the merit had collapsed, it was equivalent to losing the title of first wife. She was still the first wife, but it was more troublesome to deal with these foreign species. This kind of trouble was beneficial to Lu Xiaoyi. Because time slowed down, it was a process, and it was more convenient for him to watch from the sidelines. How should he do it? The fragment did not have the consciousness to keep it a secret, so the first wife's methods were vividly displayed in front of him. Yi Hang's merit power was purified, and the pure Buddhist intent was actively absorbed by the fragment. Most of the pure spiritual power was taken advantage of by Lu Xiaoyi. This was the most refined power in the world. After being tempered by the Great Path, there was not a trace of impurities, and there was no residual power left by anyone. It raised Lu Xiaoyi's already strong spiritual power to another level. He didn't know the specific benefits yet, but there was a simple comparison. Previously, he could split the sword light into 10,000 rays. Now, he should be able to double the number, or even more, if Monk Yi Hang still stupidly continued to transfer merit to this place. After the depression of fighting with the monk, Lu Xiaoyi finally arrived at the harvest season. His greatest gain was not that he would be able to control Yi Hang in the future. As long as he survived, it was only a matter of time before he suppressed the monk. It was also not that his spiritual power had become much stronger in an instant. He could still achieve this through time. His real gain was that under the premise of not believing in Buddhism, he completely understood one of the cornerstones of Buddhism, merit. This was something that was simply unimaginable. If you did not believe in Buddhism, how could you understand Buddhism? But now he had done it. He understood Buddhism, but he still did not believe in Buddhism. And from this, he could easily extend it to other aspects of Buddhism. This was a decisive watershed in his cultivation. From now on, his vision would be different. Chapter 999. Yi Hang shook his head in confusion. He could feel that something was different, but he couldn't tell what was going on. If he was still a half-deity in his past life, he would have realized what was going on in seconds. However, he couldn't do it now. He had part of the understanding of merit from his past life, but he wasn't well-versed in it. This wasn't his problem, but his realm. How could you ask a bodhisattva to master the power of Bodhi? He only felt that wherever the sword cultivator went, the demand for the power of merit was becoming greater and greater. The swordsman's final spiritual fortress had been completely broken, and the merit was pouring in. Logically speaking, the battle should have ended quickly, and the swordsman's last consciousness would be stabilized. Why was it like a bottomless pit? That damned swordsman, not only did he not die in peace, he even tried to play tricks on him. He could only continue to transfer the merit. Even if his recovery would be slower, he still hoped that he wouldn't have to make a trip there himself. He would have to solve the problem in a better way. He couldn't be blamed for being slow, because the one who punished him wasn't a human, nor was it a swordsman. Instead, it was the path of merit that originated from the same source as him. Even if he was tricked, he wouldn't feel anything wrong. However, it was really a bottomless pit. 30 was like a wolf, 40 was like a tiger, and the swordsman was like a 50. If you were too slow, he would take the initiative to absorb it. Yi Hang felt that something was wrong. His opponent's final spiritual fortress had been broken, and he had lost control of his body. How did he end up in such an awkward situation? Of course, he didn't know that Lu Xiaoyi didn't regain control of his body on purpose. There was no need for that. It was a matter of seconds, and he had completely recovered. How could he cheat merit? How could he cheat the spiritual power? Yiheng didn't have much of the 5 elemental Taoist energy left in his body. When he finally realized that the other side's demand for merit had affected his recovery, his vigilance returned. Although he didn't know what was going on, he knew that something was wrong. He was glad that he was in an extra-dimensional space. Otherwise, the swordsman would have followed the traces of merit and found his way here. He was also a resolute person. With a long sigh, he resolutely cut off the connection between merit and the distance. At the last moment, a divine sense was transmitted back along with the merit. Blasphemy merit. What will you use to redeem yourself in this life? Yiheng the monk stood in the space. How could he not know the secret weakness of his power of merit? That's right. What could he use to redeem himself? At the very least, as long as this swordsman was around, there would be no place for Yiheng to stand. Not long ago, they had fought for more than 10 days without a clear victor. But if they met again, it would only be a matter of a sword. This was because his merits were nothing in front of that swordsman. How could this be? What exactly happened? Yiheng fell into endless regret in the alternate dimension. It was over. Lu Xiaoyi spread his sleeves and stood up. He felt that he had never been in such a good mental state before. It was not only because his mental power had doubled, stepping over the crude restrictions in the wild boar. He exited the cave and was surrounded by mountains. In his eyes, it was a different scene. This was because he used to see the world through the eyes of Tao, but now he saw the world through the eyes of Buddhism and Taoism. The difference was huge. For Buddhism to be able to compete with Taoism for countless years, it was an undeniable fact that they had their own subtle uses. Just like the world in his eyes now, from the different perspectives of Taoism and Buddhism, there was Taoism's calm and unruly nature, but there was also Buddhism's compassion for the common people and the world of merit. The most important thing for a cultivator to improve was not to be stagnant. There was a reason for existence. When you learn to accept other people's ideas to improve yourself, it would be a qualitative leap. The world of monsters slowly unfolded in Lu Xiaoyi's eyes. At the same time, his yuaning also unfolded. From less than 3 inches, he nimbly jumped up and stood firmly on top of the 3 inches. Exactly, Buddhism is not Tao, and Tao is not Buddhism. With the word sword at the top, what is the difference between you and me? He was in a good mood and wanted to roar, but he was afraid that he would startle the flowers, grass, beasts, and demons. Yes, there was also a swaggering pig in the distance. It turned out that he had fallen into the deserted world of Silu and arrived at the territory of the wild boar. He thought that he was also hidden here. It was very safe, but the method of saving people was too crude. Not to mention elixirs, there was not even a bowl of water. Did it think that he was one of those monsters with a copper head and iron bones? In his perception, the wild boar was flying in a crooked manner. As it flew, it suddenly pounced and drilled into a patch of grass. Then it stuck out its head and quietly looked behind. As it flew, it drilled into the mud and only revealed its nose to identify the suspicious aura around it. Was it trying to get rid of a possible stalker? Although it was very clumsy, its mood was understandable. It was really a cautious pig. It was enlightened. It was very likely that it was only halfway enlightened. Before the wild boar discovered him, Lu Xiaoyi returned to the cave and sat cross-legged in his original position. He was very curious. What was hidden in the wild boar's strange movements? It was not that he was suspicious of the pig. He had saved the wild boar before, and the wild boar had now repaid his karma. However, he felt that this guy was very strange. Its behavior was not like that of a pig. The wild boar was cautious all the way. It sneaked into the cave and looked at its senior, who was sitting cross-legged. Sure enough, he was not dead. It sat down in front of Lu Xiaoyi, took out the thigh of an unknown animal, and began to gnaw on it. As it gnawed, it talked endlessly. "Senior, when are you going to wake up? Will you become a perfected cultivator when you wake up? You can't just run away after waking up. This time, no matter what, you have to bring me, this old pig, to the colorful world to enjoy. I have already given the cave residents to others. The secretaries also have their own arrangements. The family property has also been distributed. Now, I'm all alone. I can only wait anxiously. Senior, you won't be sitting here for hundreds or thousands of years, right? If that's really the case, please tell me in advance. I will bring the secretaries back first. The wild boar talked endlessly. When it finished gnawing on the thigh and finished talking, it got up and patted its butt. I will come back in a few days. There are still some loose ends that have not been cleaned up. Senior, take your time to cultivate. It's best if you directly cultivate to become an immortal. Then, everyone will be at ease. The wild boar shook its head and left the cave. Along the way, it did not forget to repair various restrictions. Then, it left on the black cloud. The only thing that did not change was that it was still sneaky. It circled around countless times and came back to attack. It was being careful. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Originally, it was not a big deal. However, when others saw its behavior, they would think that something was wrong. The wild boar was very simple. It called him Senior because it wanted to be close to him. He did not dislike it. So be it. But why did it want to go with him? He had never promised it, right? Of course, if it wanted to go, he would not stop it. Wasn't it just bringing it to Zhou Xian, where spiritual vigor was more abundant? It was not a big deal. With this kind of friendship, everything else was a small matter. Humans had the desire to improve, and so did demonic beasts. There was no harm in going out to broaden their horizons. Chapter 1000. The wild boar sneaked all the way back to Pighead Mountain. After a few days, the excitement had long passed. Even a newly recruited secretary had been arranged. The cave on the mountain seemed a little empty. There was only one person accompanying it, great deity Niu Li. To be honest, Old Cow was a little dissatisfied. He was the one who had saved that person. What was going on now? Was Second Brother going to guard against him as well? However, it and Second Brother had known each other for many years. They knew each other very well. It also knew that Second Brother did not have any ill intentions and did not want to monopolize the food. It was just afraid that its big mouth could not control itself. Everyone else had left, but it was the only one that refused to leave. The wild boar had made things clear. Third Brother, don't blame me. I did not leave you here entirely out of ill intentions. First, it is to control your mouth. Don't spout nonsense when you drink. Second, when Senior Brother wakes up, there will definitely be great benefits. You won't have worked hard for nothing. What's the point of returning to Ox Head Mountain? There are no servants or secretaries. You are a pauper. No one will pick up that lousy white mountain, even if you throw it out. I heard that your place is still suffering from drought in recent years. Even the river is dry. Why go back? Why don't you accompany Second Brother to have fun here? When Senior Brother wakes up, I want to go to the universe with him to see the world. If we really leave, who knows how long it will take for us to come back. Let's have a good gathering. Who knows, it might be the last days of our lives. His words made great immortal Neo's heroic spirit short of breath. His heart was filled with resentment, and he could only accompany the wild boar to fool around here. Wild boar had returned this time. Senior Brother had already slept in the cave for a year. It seemed that he would need many years to wake up. Wild boar knew what was good for him and did not dare to visit too often. He only visited once every month. He did not know how long these days would last. He could not help but feel a little regretful that his secretary had been too rash. As a result, there was no place for him to play now. Two energetic big demons gathered together. It was a little boring. They were already tired of fighting each other. It was better to find some fun. On the third day of their return, a demon wind blew. A horse head stretched out from the black clouds and shouted at the two demons. Second Brother, Third Brother, quickly follow Big Brother on a trip. Trouble has arisen in Dayuan again. Desert 3 climbers have come to Dayuan to snatch territory again. The two of them hurriedly approached and asked for more details. It turned out that the 3 of them were sworn brothers. The great immortal Mali the Great Immortal Zhu Li and the Great Immortal Niu Li were their titles. Of course, they had given themselves these titles. Among the three's territories, the wild boar's location was slightly further away, while the territories of Ma Li and Niu Li were close to each other. They were both located in a place called Dayuan. Dayuan was also known as the Cow and Horse Plains. This was because the two most famous monsters in this area were Ma Li and Niu Li. Next to the Ox and Horse Plain was a desert. There were also three great demons in the desert. They were the Horned Centipede, the 1,000 Feet, and the Evading Army. The Horned Centipede was a type of sand snake. The 1,000 Feet was Ma Lu's many-legged worm, and the Evading Army was what people often called a chameleon. Because they were born crawling on the ground, they were called the Desert Three Climbers by the three great immortals to show their disdain and contempt. What these three fellows wanted to do the most in their lives was to move from the desert to the Ox and Horse Plains with abundant water and grass. Of course, they had a conflict with the three great immortals. From the Jin Dan to the current Yuanying, they would come once every few decades to decide the ownership of the Ox and Horse Plains through various methods. However, the local demons of the Ox and Horse Plains were all loyal to their old masters. The things from the desert were too terrifying, and their appearances were not to their liking, so they had never succeeded. Among the demons, there were also differences in beauty and ugliness. For example, why was the great immortal Ma Li the boss of the three immortals? It was not entirely because of his strength, but more because of his elegant and handsome appearance, which gained the approval of all the demons. The great immortal Niu Li was also not bad. He was courageous and powerful, and had an imposing aura. It was just that the second brother pig was a little weak, but in any case, he was not too ugly. He was always within the demon's aesthetic range. However, the Desert Three Climbers' appearance was a little too ugly. Perhaps it was within the acceptable range of the desert animals, but in a normal geographical environment, it was very difficult to accept. Where did this kind of aesthetic concept come from? However, it was probably related to humans. Humans could accept demons like Malu, Niu Pig, but very few could accept chameleon snakes. As time passed, the deserted world of Silu had formed a rather unique aesthetic concept. In terms of strength, no matter if it was the three immortals or the Desert Three Climbers, they were actually on par. No one could have a complete advantage. It all depended on their performance and luck. However, to be in charge of a party, it was not only a competition of combat power. It depended on who could fight and who could get the demon heart more. In this regard, although there were very few humans in the deserted world of Silu, the mainstream consciousness of the cultivation world of the universe was still reflected here. Humans valued mortals very much, and so did the demons. However, because there was no cultivation system, they valued the feelings of the low-level demons. For example, those chi refining beasts that had just reached the level of gathering sun essence and moon essence, those foundation building beasts that had Taoist foundation, and those Jin Dan beasts that had made some achievements. Without the support of these low-level demons, it was impossible for them to take over an area. This was the reason why, even though the Desert Three Climbers were spying on the Nyoma Plain, they had never been able to take over it. However, in the recent decades, the situation had changed. The Nyoma Plain had been suffering from drought for many years. At first, it was a small drought, but later, it became a major drought. The water and grass used to be abundant, but now it had become dry and cracked. The living environment had been greatly affected. The small demons had also evolved from ordinary beasts. Who would want to live in such a place? Therefore, in recent years, more and more groups of beasts migrated. Everyone left their homes. Without the support of the huge group of ordinary beasts, the big and small demons started to complain. The rule of the Ma Li and Niu Li started to be challenged. Ordinary beasts could migrate. No matter where they moved, they would just be food for other demons. No demon would not welcome the arrival of food. However, it was difficult for demons to migrate, because if you moved over, you would actually be fighting for territory. Therefore, you had to fight with your own ability. Not every monster had such an ability. Therefore, under the instigation of some demons, all kinds of rumors were spread. The spearhead was pointed at the Ma-Li and Nyo-Li, saying that they had provoked the wrath of the heavens. That was why the heavens did not rain. Unless the masters were changed, the Nyoma plain would become a desert sooner or later. It went without saying who spread the rumors. After the momentum was built, the issue of appearance was gradually placed under the issue of survival. The big and small demons slowly reached an agreement. Whoever could ask for rain would be the future master of the Nyoma plain. This kind of request was very fair. Survival came first. The great immortal Ma-Li had come this time to find his two brothers. He wanted to have another fight with the three climbers in the great desert. However, this time, it was not about whose fist was harder, whose skin was thicker, who dared to risk their lives. This time, it was about the rain. 10 days later, on the most famous immortal bestowment platform in the Nyoma plain, with all the big and small demons in the Nyoma plain as witnesses, the three climbers challenged the three immortals. They wanted to see who could ask for rain. Chapter 1001. P.S. Before the Spring Festival, I will update 3 times a day to prepare for the Spring Festival. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to your understanding. Thank you. The wild boar agreed to Boss Ma's request. With his current yuanying strength, it would only take him a few days to reach Nyoma Yuan. If he flew over from the outer realm, it would be even faster. He had just seen his senior brother, and the next time would be a month later. There was still enough time. Besides, he was really bored. Of course, he had to help his brother. The wild boar was very loyal. Because there was still time, the three immortals hurried in the region and discussed countermeasures. The Nyo-Li was very distressed. Summoning the wind and rain is not our strength, right? Even if I use all my strength, I can at most make a few drops of rainfall in a palm-sized area. For Nyoma Yuan, this is not enough. If we had this ability, we would have done it long ago. We are all our own people. Why would we wait until now? The Ma-Li gritted his teeth and said, "Third brother, you are right. Not to mention the 3 of us. Even if we count all the monsters in Silu, how many of them are good at making rain? But this time, I asked the Jiao Jun for 3 wind and rain talismans. I think we can deal with it. We can't, but the 3 crawlers can? They're not as good as us. If they have that ability, why would they stay in the desert?" The 2 monsters argued, but they thought that this was just the usual provocation of the 3 crawlers. In the end, everyone just urged the rain to come down. Then, what should be done would be done. It would not change the fundamental nature of Nyoma Yuan. Cultivators urging rain was a great magical power. It was not like what was written in the novels, where as long as a living creature had the ability to cultivate, they could summon the wind and rain. This was a conceptual misunderstanding. Even if it was a cultivator of the Water Tower realm, he might be able to make rain in a small area, but to make rain in a large area for a long time, that was a completely different matter. A real downpour required the help of nature, sufficient water in the clouds, and the cooperation of various environmental factors. Only then could the power of nature be displayed. It was not a water-based environment formed in the battlefield for the sake of battle and enlightenment. Creating rain out of thin air on a vast plain with a diameter of 1,000 miles, and with enough time, enough intensity, and enough rainfall. This was something that even ordinary true monarchs would find difficult to achieve. Even if they used the power of the 5 elements, how much magic power would they need to achieve this? Haste rain was not the sweet rain technique, nor was it the rain-dissolving talisman. It was not as simple as one imagined. Relatively speaking, demonic beasts with this kind of ability were few and far between. Land demonic beasts were not able to do it. Only some water demonic beasts in large rivers and lakes could barely do it. They also needed the cooperation of nature. In other words, the natural weather conditions were the main reason. The rain-bearer could control the time, size, length, and intensity of the rain. This was the so-called rain-bearer in the cultivation world. The deserted world of Silu was a boundary dominated by land demonic beasts. There were not many water demonic beasts, and their strength was mediocre. In the vicinity of the oxen and horse plain, the only one who had some strength and relied on a large river was the Jiao Jun. The Jiao Jun was the ruler of the only large river in the vicinity of thousands of miles. The rainfall in this area was basically decided by him. He could play a role in where there was more and less rain, where there was flood, and where there was drought. Because of the drought in the oxen and horse plain, Ma Li and Yo Li had begged the Jiao Jun countless times. Every time they begged, there would be a little harvest. The Jiao Jun was also in a difficult position. It had tried its best, but in the end, it could not be the enemy of the heavens. The wild boar had also advised the two brothers to give more gifts and move around more often. Don't try to gain something without risking anything. This was its experience of several generations of demonic beasts. Unfortunately, the two brothers did not understand this experience. They always thought that the heavens had its own rules and that demonic power could not be changed, let alone obstructed. It did not matter whether they gave gifts or not. They were also poor and had a bunch of small demonic beasts who needed to eat and drink. Everyone was in the Yuanying realm. Why should they give gifts to the wild boar? As time went on, the oxen and horse plain was dragged to the current situation. The wild boar felt that this might be the last time it helped. For the sake of the two brothers, there were some things that it would not feel good if it did not say them out loud. Big brother, third brother, old boar is about to go on a long journey. There are some things that I have to say. Don't blame me. I thought that we could not be careless in the rain challenge of Sanpu. Then, he must have come prepared and planned for a long time. If we look at the timeline a little longer, it is not impossible that he started planning decades ago. Moreover, I guess that there is still some unclear relationship between them and the Jiao Jun. Although there is no evidence, I feel that way. If I guess right, Sanpu must have something to rely on this time. If he has the support of the Jiao Jun behind him, the rain-melting talismans that Big Brother asked for are just 3 pieces of waste paper. When the time comes, what can they do? These words made Ma Li and Yo Li panic. They knew that their second brother was shrewd in handling matters, so they hurriedly asked for advice. However, the wild boar's intelligence was limited, and its strength was even more limited. It was not easy for it to vaguely guess some clues. As for the solution, it had no direction at all. It was not in the oxen and horse plain, so it did not feel any pain. Moreover, its mind was not on the desolate world of Silu. Since it had become a Yuanying, it only wanted to continue its never-ending search. Its goal was the Sea of Stars, so why would it care about the matters of the domain? The 3 demons discussed and discussed, but could not find a feasible solution. They could only wait until they arrived at the place and see what the situation was like. Treating the head when it hurts, treating the foot when it hurts. This was the usual way of doing things for demons. After 7 or 8 days, the 3 demons arrived at the immortal ascension stage of the oxen and horse plain. They were immediately shocked by the scene in front of them. There were a lot of demons, big and small. Basically, all the demons that had not left the oxen and horse plain were gathered here. Not only that, there were also a few big Yuanying demons near the oxen and horse plain. Although their territory was not as dry as the oxen and horse plain, it was more or less affected. Immortal Ascension Stage was the only place in the oxen and horse plain that had a name. It was actually a stone platform that stood in the middle of the plain. It was hundreds of feet high and the top was flat. It was the place where the demons of the oxen and horse plain discussed and gathered to worship. The 3 immortals felt that these big demons did not come with good intentions. The wild boar whispered, "This must be the work of Sanpu. He asked these neighbors to come here to prevent us from praying for rain into a chaotic battle. So he asked for some witnesses." The 3 of them discussed along the way and finally decided that the best way was to stir up the situation. They would provoke each other verbally and cause a physical conflict. Then, the matter of praying for rain would naturally be left unsettled. But now, it seemed that someone had already gone ahead of them. As the master of the oxen and horse plain, they did not know that all the big and small demons were gathered together. This in itself meant something. That was the general dissatisfaction caused by the long drought. Now, the dissatisfaction was being used by someone else. Obviously, this person wanted to take this opportunity to kick them off the stage and completely take over the oxen and horse plain. Only at this time did Ma Li and Nyo Li completely believe in the second brother's judgment. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chapter 1002. The top of the Immortal Ascension platform was empty, but the bottom of the Immortal Ascension platform was bustling with people. The closest ones were a dozen yuanying big monsters. In addition to the Initiator 3 crawlers, there were also tiger monsters, wolf monsters, ape monsters, and eagle monsters. These monsters were the real fighting monsters. Their strength was stronger than the three immortals. Their purpose of gathering here was very clear. They wanted to prevent the three immortals from causing trouble. On the outer layer were the golden core demons of Ox and Horseplane. Going further out in order, there were Foundation Establishment and Shi Refinement little demons, numbering in the thousands. They were all gathered here, waiting for the birth of a new master. Since they were monsters, they basically had some spiritual intelligence. They had already seen the decline of the three immortals. Things were obvious. If the three immortals really had the ability to make rain, wouldn't they have done it long ago? They had been unable to do anything until now. If the three crawlers in the desert could change the drought, they wouldn't mind changing their master. Water was more important than anything else for life. As for the cultivation environment in the deserted world of Silu, although there were no humans here, the overall structure was slowly and subtly influenced by the human system after a long time of limited contact. It was not completely brainless fighting between monsters, especially when two groups of monsters had a dispute. Since the three crawlers couldn't drive the three immortals away by force, they could only think of a way through the rules. Praying for rain was a conspiracy they had been plotting for decades. From the beginning of the small drought to the current thousands of miles of barren land, their purpose was to gain prestige through praying for rain and occupy the Nyoma plain openly. In this regard, the three immortals were still too slow. The only one who was a bit cunning didn't pay attention to it all. When the three immortals arrived, the situation was basically settled. The big monsters present had already reached a consensus. The so-called praying for rain was just a ceremony for the small monsters to see. They were very clear that the three crawlers praying for rain would definitely succeed, but the three immortals would definitely fail. Because there was only one big river on the side of the Nyoma plain, the Jiao Jun. Who could change Jiao Jun's decision? Water was unique to any living being or celestial body. Therefore, among the demon beasts of the West Lu Wasteland, the position of aquatic demon beasts was very special. They might not be the strongest, but they could influence the distribution of water resources in a large area. This made their position particularly important. No one was willing to offend them, and in the end, their territory would either be drained or flooded. The three immortals ushered in the big day of praying for rain in isolation and helplessness. They still had some friends, but distant water could not quench present thirst. There was not enough time, and even if they gathered their friends, it would just be another fight, which would not solve the problem. Friends would always leave, so how could the three of them deal with the hostility around them? Most importantly, the decades of drought had caused them to lose the support of their demonic hearts. This was the root of their failure. Demonic beasts didn't have as many rules as humans when it came to praying for rain. They also didn't have three animals as offerings. If they did, they should put three people up there. As the presiding priest, the tiger monster announced the rules of praying for rain. It was very direct and straightforward. Each side will send one person up to pray for rain. The time limit is 45 minutes. If the rain doesn't come, it will be considered a failure. Each side is only allowed to go up there 3 times. There will be no delay. Whoever deliberately makes trouble in the process of praying for rain will automatically admit defeat. This time, praying for rain is the request of many people in the Nyoma plain. It is a big event related to the lives of demons. Whoever succeeds will be in charge of the Nyoma plane. If both sides fail, they will choose another superior monster. We can't let the plane dry forever. The three immortals were speechless. The procedures had been arranged, so they couldn't refuse. Their small group of three looked pale and powerless in front of the big groups around the Nyoma plain. They could only bear it silently and hope that the weather would change in the matter of praying for rain. After all, even demonic beasts of the water nationality couldn't completely control the natural climate change. The day of praying for rain was chosen very well. The sky was covered with lead clouds and a storm was coming. If such a scene was elsewhere, it would be a proper rhythm of rain. However, in the Nyoma plain, they had seen such scenes too many times in the past decades. No matter how thick the clouds were, they were dense and didn't rain. They had to wait for the clouds to drift to other places before it rained. It was also very strange. Therefore, even if the rhythm of rain was obvious, the monsters didn't dare to expect it to really rain. They pinned their hopes on the ability of their new master. Molly looked serious. Second brother, third brother, we have to strive to be the first to go on stage to pray for rain. I see that the rain clouds are accumulating, the wind is blowing, the swallows are flying, the toads are coming out of their holes, the ants are moving, the fish are floating, the earthworms are going on the road, and the chickens are not entering the nest. Maybe they predicted that there would be a heavy rain here, so they deliberately set a trap for us. We should take the initiative to gain the upper hand and use the power of heaven for ourselves. If we are lucky enough to get it, the dust will settle. Before the weather changes, who will doubt our position in the Nyoma plain? Wild Boar nodded in agreement. This was the right thing to do. Under such weather conditions, only a fool wouldn't know how to make use of it. Boss Ma went up to draw lots and guessed with Jiao Qi under the witness of many yuaning big monsters. He came back dejectedly not long after. Wild Boar comforted him. Big brother, don't be discouraged. They're like snakes and rats in the same nest. They have already colluded with each other. What we can think of, they can also think of. No matter which one of us three brothers goes up, the result will be the same. Hee, the weather changes according to people. How can it be controlled casually? Who knows? Maybe if we go up early, it will only benefit us brothers. These were purely comforting words. There was no other way. They were meat on the chopping block. Now, the three of them could only hope that the heavens would open their eyes. They couldn't count on anything else. Jiao Qi was immensely proud of itself as it leaped onto the high platform. This was the plan that the three of them had been plotting for decades in the desert. Today was the day to complete it. Standing on a high platform, it revealed its original form. It was a huge sand snake with its head raised to the sky. There were two horns on its head, indicating that the Jiao Qi was closely related to the dragon race by blood. It was not completely unreasonable to say that there was a dragon in the sky and a snake on the ground. The dragon race was recognized in the cultivation world as the ancient beast that was best at summoning the wind and summoning the rain. As a distant relative of the dragon, the Jiao Qi was the first to go up this time because it didn't want to give the three immortals even the slightest chance. Moreover, it had already made proper arrangements to summon the clouds and summon the rain. How could it have the ability of a water demon beast? Other than the dragon horn on its head, it wasn't a real dragon horn, but more like a deer's horn. It lived in the desert and didn't know anything about summoning the rain. But it didn't matter. It had friends who knew how to curry favor. That was enough. On the high platform, the snake twisted its body and flicked its tongue. It was just like a human swindler who lured a god into his body. It was just to attract attention and prove that it had used all its strength. This was a necessary action. The great demons of the Yuaning understood this, but the thousands of lesser demons didn't. In the midst of the act, the snake shook its tail and a rain talisman flew into the clouds. This was actually just for show. What kind of talisman could cause rain to fall over 1,000 li? It was just a message. The moment the rain talisman entered the clouds, thunder roared and lightning flashed. The thousands of lesser demons below cheered in unison. It was really going to rain. Chapter 1003. The rain talisman pierced through the clouds and came to the side of a Jiao dragon in the depths of the clouds. The Jiao dragon smiled faintly. It was just a story. How could it be real? Since it was an agreement, of course, it had to act according to the plan. It used its ability to adjust the rain clouds and thunder first to stimulate the water. Once the water was strong enough, it would rain heavily. This time was very fast, less than a quarter of an hour. It was more than enough for the three-quarter time limit of the Jiaoho below. The clouds had been arranged long ago. With the Jiao dragon's ability, it was impossible to arrange such a large cloud in such a short time. It was only borrowing the power of nature and making use of it slightly. In the past, it would control the clouds to move to other areas and then rain. It had been entrusted by others, so it had to do its job. This time, since it had already been discussed, of course, it would let nature take its course. The people of Oxen and Horse Plains were also suffering. It had been dozens of years. If it had not rained now, it would be too much. It would be detrimental to the development of aquatic creatures like it. This kind of rain was actually very easy. With the power of the heavens, it was just a matter of convenience. As the lightning flashed, it suddenly felt that something was wrong. The place where the light flashed seemed to be different from normal lightning. Before it could react, its entire body suddenly stiffened. It did not urge the lightning, nor did it guide the lightning, nor did the clouds gather. This was because a flying sword had stopped right on top of the Jiaoho's head. Under the stimulation of the sword's light, it felt as if its entire body was out of control. It did not even dare to turn its head. It could only murmur softly, "Immortal, spare me. Immortal, spare me." I don't know what this little demon did wrong to provoke Immortal to fight on the battlefield. Scylla demons do not have enough knowledge. If you have any orders, just say it. I will change. A flying sword could only come from a human cultivator, and it was the fiercest swordsman in the universe's cultivation world. A swordsman who would go on a killing spree at the slightest disagreement. Therefore, unyielding words could not be spoken. It was said that swordsmen were generally amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. A voice slowly sounded in its mind. "I just feel that this reign of yours came at a bad time." The Jiao dragon immediately reacted. Did the backer of the three immortals come looking for them? How did they manage to find a human cultivator to be their backer in such a timely manner? However, there was no time to think too much about these problems. What was important was the current attitude. I understand. I won't answer the three crawls and raises again talisman. I will only answer the three immortals. Are you satisfied with this? Jiao Qi twisted her slender waist, feeling as if her waist was about to break. However, the movements in the clouds above actually stopped. This made it very puzzled. Didn't they already agree? As soon as the rain talisman arrived, it immediately summoned wind and lightning. Clouds and rain? In the beginning, everything was fine. The wind was blowing and the thunder was rumbling. It was just one step away from the rain. But after waiting for a long time, the thunder stopped and the wind stopped blowing. The sky was calm again, but the clouds were getting denser. Jiao Jun wasn't ready yet. Did it release the rain talisman too early? That shouldn't be the case. If you weren't prepared, you could have just said something. It wouldn't have been difficult. He couldn't even jump into the clouds to take a look. This was because they had already agreed to compete on the ground to see who could summon the rain from the heavenly Tao. In fact, they were afraid that the three immortals would jump into the clouds and discover that there was a Jiao hiding in the clouds. Wouldn't that expose everything? This agreement was originally meant to restrain the three immortals, but now it was the other way around. They sent their divine sense up, but there was no response. They didn't know what had happened above. Some people were sad, and some people were happy. Sandcrawls was baffled, but the three immortals came back from the dead. Just now, the wind rose and the thunder flashed. They all thought that there was no hope for them to return this time. When the time was up, Neoli yelled from below, "Time's up. If you don't come down, everyone will go their separate ways. You guys set the rules, and now you guys are the ones who broke them. How can you be so unreasonable?" Jiao Qi had no choice but to come down. Although it felt that the rain was about to fall, It should be credited to it. Molly took out 3 rain talismans from the Jiao Jun, one for each of the 3 brothers. Brother, I'll go up first. I don't know if I'll succeed, but you guys should be mentally prepared. Before it finished speaking, its body was already leaping up. It was worried that if the rain fell at this time, who would be the one to blame? Once it was on the platform, it was no different from the Jiao Qi. It also revealed its true form. Raising its hooves and neck, it raised its head and let out a long neigh towards the sky. Then, it took out the rain talisman and threw it upwards. The rain talisman flew upwards and disappeared into the clouds. In the clouds, the Jiao didn't dare to move, because the flying sword didn't move at all. It knew that it couldn't withstand the attack from the flying sword, and it didn't dare to compete with the swordsman in terms of ruthlessness. Therefore, when it saw another talisman floating up, it didn't dare to make the decision, even if it was the 3 Immortals talisman. That voice said calmly, "Do you think I'm too domineering? Bullying others with my power? A human coming to Silu to stir up trouble? Sooner or later, you'll gather an army of monsters to get back at me?" The Jiao's forehead was covered in cold sweat. "I don't dare to think about it. I don't dare to do it. Immortal, you must have a reason for coming here. I'm slow and can't understand. Whatever you say, I'll do it." That voice was still calm. It hasn't rained for decades. The impact on this place is huge, and I don't think a mere river demon like you can do it. Tell me, whose power did you borrow? The tip of the sword stabbed forward slightly, and the Jiao felt its mind go numb. This sword was too scary. I'll talk. Although I have the power to control the clouds and rain, I can only go with the flow of nature. I can change the location slightly, a few days earlier, a few days later, and control the size. It's not my power to control the rain for decades. But a few decades ago, a human monk came here and gave me a water bowl, saying that I could control the rhythm of the rain with it. I tried it, and it was true. Then, 3 climbers of the desert wanted to use the drought tactic to drive the 3 immortals away. They promised me some benefits, so I agreed to help. The Jiao trembled as it took out a water bowl. It looked very ordinary, but it was half filled with water. Although the water bowl was small, it seemed to be unfathomable. Its movements were slow, as it was afraid that the swordsman would be suspicious and misunderstand its actions. That voice chuckled. "So, with the Buddhists doing again, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Do you want to know the truth about this water bowl?" The Jiao nodded, but its thoughts were complicated. It understood that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the cultivation world. It was just that the cost was unknown, but the gain was right in front of its eyes. As time passed, it would slowly forget about it. Now that the swordsman mentioned it, its curiosity was piqued. Even if it was guilty of the 3 climbers' request, it could still return their gift. Comparatively speaking, this mysterious water bowl was more important because it was related to its roots. Chapter 1004. Molly had also been tossing and turning on the platform for a good 45 minutes. In the end, his legs were weak and his throat was hoarse. Not to mention rain. He did not even see wind or thunder. He was even worse than the Jiao Sea. Wild Boar came down angrily and comforted him. "Since you didn't get rain, you still have a chance. Why are you so unhappy? In my opinion, no one here can control this rain. It's good news for us that no one can control it." This was the truth. For the 3 immortals, this was already the best result. The 3 crawlers finally heaved a sigh of relief. They were also very nervous when they could not contact the Jiao Dragon. They did not know what happened up there. Only a group of big demons who were watching the show were pointing and whispering. The wolf demon asked in a low voice, "Big Brother Tiger, I wonder what this old flood dragon is doing up there? Did he lose his strength after playing with the clam girl for too long yesterday? Should we find a chance to go up there and take a look?" Lord Who sneered, "What's there to look at? It's none of our business. The 3 immortals are stingy, the 3 crawlers are ugly and cunning, and the Jiao is always on the fence. They are not good people. Let's just watch the show." It's best if we can't get rain, then this place will belong to us. We have many demons, so we can try one by one. Maybe we can get lucky. I think the clouds are so thick that it won't disperse until the real rain comes. The next one to go up was Malu. He was originally full of confidence, but now he was hesitant. What happened up there? He was very clear that the rain talisman was just for show. It had no real function and was only a reminder. The final result depended on the Jiao dragon who was operating it. It leaped onto the stage and revealed its true form. The thousand-legged worm stood upright, twisting and shaking to its heart's content. It was very ugly. If it were not for the fact that they were praying for rain, this unique ugliness would have attracted a group of demons to beat it up. It was a disgrace to the demon race. The Jiao stared at the water bowl in front of him. Under the influence of the swordsman, the true face of the holy mountain was gradually revealed. Even though he did not know much about karma, as a veteran Yuaniing beast, he had heard of it before. At this level, different paths lead to the same goal. He already possessed the basic ability to discern. Although it didn't know how a swordsman was able to decipher Buddhist techniques, it knew that it was true. What was displayed in the water basin could not be faked because it contained the details of the decades since it took over this Buddhist instrument. That voice was like a narration. Nothing is without cause and effect. There was nothing that did not produce merit, just like what you've been doing in the Oxen Plains for the past few decades. When you lay down the first drop of sweet rain after a long drought, all the merit and virtue will belong to Buddha. And in these decades, due to the drought, the displacement of people, the migration of people, the death of thirst, and the frenzied attacks will all be recorded on your head. This is also a kind of merit. You are a great member of the Water Clan. You would rather sacrifice yourself for the sake of the Buddha. Is this what you want? The Jiao trembled in anger. Over the past few decades, it valued the extraordinary power that the water bowl brought to it more and more. This made it more and more famous on this land. It was called the Rainbringer, the Rain Dragon, and so on. It did not expect to pay such a high price. This was because of its ignorance, and also because of its own greed. This was the result of trying to break free from the control of nature. It might have indeed broken free, but it fell into another trap, a trap set by humans. Nature would not harm it, but humans would. The Jiao's anger gave it courage again. It was no longer afraid of the flying sword in front of it. So what if it took its life? Its future as a cultivator had come to an end because it had been targeting the Oxen Plains for decades. It thought that the Buddhists would bear all the responsibility. It pushed the flying sword away with its front paws and suddenly turned around. Not far behind it, a Taoist was looking at it calmly. The Jiao was full of anger. Don't think that I will thank you for pointing this out to me. Don't think that I don't know that you have your own motives. If it were not for the conflict between Taoists and Buddhists, how could a remote place like Silu be involved in this mess? If you had not reminded me, I could have lived happily for at least a few hundred years. But now, you are making me live in regret. I will not make the rain fall on either side. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. It seemed that his wish to play the role of a savior would not come true. He had always wondered why it was so difficult for him to be a good person. Why was it so easy to be a bad person? Demons had a very strange way of thinking. They were either stupid enough to be fooled by the Buddhists, or they could see the essence of things clearly when they came to their senses. Since you started your cultivation, you should have known that no one can get rid of these entanglements. There is no such thing as a cultivation world without ugliness. Don't pretend to be so innocent. It's like Silu is a cultivation paradise. Humans have their ugliness. Demons have their ugliness. The only difference is that one is good at disguise and the other is evil. The flying sword was pointed at the Jiao's forehead again. Even the dragon's claws could not pry it open. Instead, it was cut open, revealing the swordsman's strong and cruel heart. For a moment, the Jiao dragon was not afraid of death. But when it was faced with death, it was not as fearless as it thought it would be. Lu Xiaoyi asked, "Do you know the true meaning of Buddhism?" The Jiao shook its head subconsciously. Lu Xiaoyi explained, "The true meaning of Buddhism is to let go of the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. Your problem now is, how do you let go of the butcher's knife? So, don't throw away the water bowl. It can be used to hold water, to cook, and to wake up at night. The Jiao Dragon understood. In its current situation, what other choice did it have? Follow Buddhism? Impossible. Follow Taoism? That would be a lie. It could only go with the flow. Thinking wholeheartedly for the sake of the Silu race was the only solution. Only then would it be able to get out of this predicament. What do you want? Lu Xiaoyi snorted. What do I want? What do you think in existence like you can provide me? I don't like the length of your shoelaces. I don't like the smell of your apron. I just want to help a few friends. I'm afraid they'll be tainted by Buddhism if I interfere. So, I hope you can take the initiative and not cause me trouble. The Jiao's veins were bulging. What if I don't agree? I'll kill you and feed you to the pigs. Lu Xiaoyi said casually, but his expression was cold. The Jiao sighed. It was more used to this kind of direct method. This was also the standard way of dealing with demons. Throw away all the tricks and talk with your fists. Okay, I promise you. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Can't you just talk nicely? Why do you have to threaten me? What a bastard. Chapter 1005. Wild Boar was the last one to go up the high platform. He was a little reluctant. The big monsters below all knew that something must have happened in the clouds, but they didn't know what it was. As for the original plan, they could only postpone it. Going up now was just a formality. They couldn't ask for anything. Even though it knew that it was just a formality, it had to go up. Among the 6 monsters, it was the last one. Ma Li and Yo Li, the 2 main characters, were useless. As a helper, it had to go down and complete the procedure to put an end to this dispute, and then wait for the next collision. However, it couldn't be so passive anymore. It was about to leave, so it had to teach the 2 brothers how to build relationships. Sanbei was its archenemy, so it didn't have to care about him. However, it had to rope in Jiao Jun, Lord Hu, and the others. If the next conflict was like this time, where the onlookers stood on Sanbei's side, then there was really no need to fight. The right time, the right place, and the right people were especially important. This was a story for later. Now, it had to go through the formality first. Wild Boar stood on the high platform. It didn't show its original form, nor did it shake its head and waggle its tail. It didn't put on airs, but directly threw the rain talisman up and scolded. It doesn't go down, and it doesn't go away. I don't know why these rain clouds are gathered here. I don't even have the mood to drink and eat meat anymore. Under the indifferent gaze of everyone, it was eager to wait for the last 3 minutes to pass so that everyone could go up to the clouds and see what Jiao Jun was doing. Why did it run away when everyone was gathered here? Amidst this indifference, the moment the rain talisman entered the clouds, lightning flashed and illuminated the earth. A heaven-shaking clap of thunder rang out, even louder than Jiao Ho's attack at the very beginning. Amidst the astonishment of the demons, a strong gust of wind blew. Mixed with the wind were huge raindrops. It hurt when they hit their bodies, but no monster dodged. There was another muffled thunder. It was as if someone in the sky had destroyed the dam of the Milky Way. Torrential rain poured down, covering the entire oxen and horses plain in the rain. Because the rain was too heavy, people's line of sight was blurred from a few zhang away. All they could see was water droplets connected to one another. When the water droplets hit the ground, endless water mist rose up. The entire ox and horse plain seemed to be covered in clouds and mist. It's raining. It's raining. Second brother is mighty, live as long as the heavens. In their ecstasy, the thousands of small demons spoke without thinking. All kinds of flattery, and bootlicking flooded over like the rain right now. Everyone could clearly see that none of the 5 demons had the ability to control the rain. Only this pig demon went up on stage and opened his mouth to curse, and it immediately worked. Could it be that God was such a wretched wretch? Talking nicely and pleading softly would not work, but had to resort to using foul language? Or perhaps he could no longer revert to his original form and had to revert to his human form. It seemed that God's incarnation was only capable of reverting to human form and was not used to other forms. The wild boar stood on the high platform. He was also a little confused by the heavy rain. He did not know what was going on. The two brothers beside him had already jumped onto the high platform. They were cheering excitedly and could not help themselves. It was no wonder that they lost their composure. The drought in the ox and horse plain for decades was solved today. The competition with the three climbers had also come to an end. At the very least, they would not have to compete to pray for rain in the future. As for fighting, they did not care. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. There was no sign of it stopping. The clouds rolled and rolled, gathering thicker and thicker. This indicated that this was going to be a long and drawn-out rainy season. It would bring new life to the ox and horse plain. There was also disharmony. The Jiao Ju jumped into the air and shouted angrily, "It doesn't count. It doesn't count. This is all due to us praying for rain." The god of thunder, the goddess of lightning, and the god of rain obviously received our rain talismans. They came late because of something urgent. In the end, it was taken advantage of by unrelated people. If you don't believe it, the cloud-traveling dragon god is up there. Let's find him to be a witness. Before he finished speaking, a bolt of lightning struck down from the clouds. It hit the crazed Jiao Ju, who was dancing with joy. The heavenly Tao is unfair. The Jiao Ju shouted and fell from the sky. His body was char-black, accompanied by a terrifying black hole phenomenon. The sudden change made the other great demons not dare to move. The lightning and the rain was not a big deal to demon cultivators at their level. They did not dodge. It was just a piece of their skin that was blackened by the lightning. How could it be killed in one strike? There must be something strange above the clouds. It was probably not something that Jiao Jun could control. In the cultivation world, humans had the least respect for the heavenly Tao. This was because they knew that the so-called heavenly Tao was actually the human Tao. The higher one's level, the more they could see. Relatively speaking, the demon beast domain like Silu was more respectful of the heavenly Tao. This was because their abilities came from their instincts. This was because they did not have much contact with the outside world. This was because they did not have a strong background. Therefore, when the strange phenomenon appeared, they subconsciously associated it with the punishment of the heavenly Tao. Was it because the demon cultivators in the ox and horse plain had changed their living environment in order to achieve a certain goal in the past few decades and angered the heavenly Tao? One of the main culprits, the Jiao Ju, was struck to death by lightning. Then what about them, the accomplices? What kind of punishment would they receive? Lord Hu rolled his eyes and had an idea. He congratulated the three immortals on the high platform. Congratulations to the three immortals for successfully praying for rain. Our neighbors can also get some benefits. In the ox and horse plain, after a long drought, the three of you are willing to be neighbors. The heavenly Tao has opened the cloth and bestowed kindness to us. We should express our gratitude and complete the etiquette. Since the three of you are the hosts, please accept the heavenly Tao. From now on, in this area, we will always be on the same side and not invade each other. As soon as Lord Hu said this, all the great demons echoed. The three immortals on the stage listened to Lord Hu's nonsense. How could they not understand what he meant? In fact, it meant that the success of praying for rain this time could not be determined who the credit was. It was definitely not the three immortals, because one of them had been struck to death. It might not be the three immortals, because it might be purely the heavenly Tao's rain, which was purely accidental. If the three immortals dared to go above the clouds in such a situation and face the heavenly Tao's scrutiny head-on, then it could be considered a complete victory. If they did it, the forces of the dozens of great demons around the ox and horse plain would no longer be unfavorable to the ox and horse plain, and everyone would be good neighbors. Lord Hu was qualified to say this, because their group was the most powerful force group on the continent. Not only the dozens of great demons, there were many more who had not come. The three immortals on the stage looked at each other. How could they not know the danger above the clouds? The Jiao Ju, just now, was the best example. The three immortals could not figure out how the rain was prayed for. There could be many reasons, but the only thing they were sure of was that it had nothing to do with the spiritual stones. This was very embarrassing. In the end, the wild boar gritted his teeth. Since it has come to this, we can't shrink back. If we don't go above the clouds at the end, the matter will never be completely solved, and there will be other three immortals coming to make trouble. Endless and endless. I don't have much time here, so I'll do my best for the two brothers and go up to see the world. Ma Li and Nyo Li supported him on each side. Let's go together. If the heavenly Tao really comes down, what's the point of leaving one alive? The three immortals live and die together. It's not for others to hear. Chapter 1006. A horse, a pig, and a cow held hands. It should be called hooves, as they flew up into the clouds. The great Yao cultivators below were all in awe. Even for Yao beasts with their true natures, it was not easy for them to truly live and die together. Lightning did not descend, but they cannot be sure yet. They had to wait and see. The three immortals flew up from the thick clouds. They flew higher and higher, deeper and deeper. Then they saw the busy Jiao Jun. At the same time, they also saw the Taoist standing not far behind the Jiao Jun. He was wearing a slightly old Taoist robe, standing quietly. The wild boar howled and rushed over, hugging his thigh and rubbing it with tears and snot. Senior brother, you've finally woken up. You've made this old pig so miserable. Molly still didn't quite understand, so Nyoli gave a brief explanation. The two of them still didn't quite understand the true origin of this Taoist, but they knew that this Taoist must have a great background and great ability. Just by looking at the prideful and arrogant old flood dragon working with all his might, not even daring to let out a fart, one would know the depth of the situation. Not to mention the dead Jiao Ho. That was not something old flood dragon could do. Lu Xiaoyi was a little embarrassed. Since when did he have such a close relationship with the wild boar? But it was a demonic beast. Perhaps the way it expressed its feelings was a little more straightforward, but it was understandable. Moreover, from the first time he saw the wild boar, he did not hate it. Now that they had such a relationship, it could be considered one of them. Yes, he was a pig. These two are. Lu Xiaoyi continued to act like an expert. Mountain Pig then introduced them one by one. Everyone was on the same side. Ma Li and Nyo Li deliberately curried favor with each other. Lu Xiaoyi also spoke humorously. In addition, there was old Flood Dragon who had turned over a new leaf. They did not mention anything about the future, but they had already decided the future direction of Nyo Ma Yuan. After this incident, Ma Li and Nyo Li also understood something, and their attitude towards the Jiao changed. Lu Xiaoyi handed a storage ring to the wild boar. There are 3,000 spiritual opportunities here. Help me pass them to Nyo Li. It's fate. I'll be leaving soon. If you want to follow me to the upper realm, you have to hurry. The wild boar's hands trembled. 3,000 jade purity? That was a wealth that it did not even dare to think about. It had been 100 years since it became a nascent soul, but the amount of jade purity it had collected in the void of the universe was less than 100. But these things were nothing to Senior Brother, right? With Senior Brother's ability, he could go anywhere in the universe. He was not like it, who only dared to wander in the nearby space, afraid that it would become a corpse if it went too far. Okay. Neoli will have more, Molly will have less. Everyone has to share in the joy. As for me, I've already prepared and can set off at any time. Lu Xiaoyi smiled faintly. You don't want to share? The wild boar took it for granted and boasted shamelessly. If I follow Senior Brother, I won't lack these things. Lu Xiaoyi could not help but laugh. Okay, I'll send you down. With a wave of his hand, the Jiao's water bowl came to his hand. He shone it downwards, and suddenly, a big hole broke open in the dense clouds. In the big hole, tens of thousands of golden lights were shining. It was bright, but not dazzling, powerful, but not overbearing. That was the manifestation of countless light of merit in the mortal world. It was as if the heavenly Tao had opened its eyes and the real immortals had descended to the mortal world. In the tens of thousands of golden lights, the three immortals slowly descended. They were all smiling so widely that their faces could not be seen. Because they wanted to show their divinity among the monsters, they all showed their original appearances. They were a five-colored horse, a big black pig, and an old yellow ox. Every single one of them was in high spirits and had an imposing appearance. Their entire body was filled with an imposing aura, and even their crotches were sticking up high. Lord, who squinted his eyes and waved his hand. Ma Lu and the chameleon were pushed aside and pressed to the ground. The wolf and bear lords looked ferocious and raised their hands to strike. In front of the two celestial phenomena, Lord Who stepped out from the crowd and laughed heartily. You three are so capable. May we be neighbors forever. 10 days later, the two figures left the desolate planet of Silu and disappeared into the vast universe. Senior brother, where are we going? The wild boar was panting from flying, but it could not hide its excitement. Lu Xiaoyi looked at it. In fact, he still did not understand why this guy wanted to come out with him no matter what. For a monster like the wild boar, it was not a good idea to leave their hometown. Although Zhou Xian's spiritual vigor was far superior to that of Silu, the spiritual vigor in the boundary region did not matter much when one reached the realm of Yuanying. The cultivation of Yuanying came from the purple, pure, spiritual vigor in the universe. For the wild boar, the world of human cultivators was very dangerous for it. It was impossible for him to keep it by his side forever. However, he could not say this. He could only wait for it to realize it. Of course, it's the upper realm of Zhou Xian. You should know. The wild boar nodded. It's the first realm in the universe. How can I not know? In the future, when I tell others about my origin, I can also say that I'm from the first realm in the universe. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Saying it out loud is not necessarily a good thing. There are many people in the cultivation world who hate the rich and the strong. Old boar, you said that you're already in the realm of Yuanying. Why don't you have a name? When you reach Zhou Xian, you can't always call yourself Wild Boar or Wild Boar, right? That's not dignified. The wild boar laughed. I already have a name, but I'm not used to it, so I rarely use it. I'll be called Ba Jie. Lu Xiaoyi was shocked. This name, could it be that this wild boar was also a transmigrator? It shouldn't be. The wild boar saw that its senior brother was shocked and felt proud. It had been in the interior realm for a long time and knew all the taboos about reincarnation in the cultivation world. There were many things that could not be said. They could only be understood and recalled by oneself. Therefore, it could not tell its senior brother about its past life, not even a word. But some things were related. For example, its senior brother was the one who gave it its name. Now that it said it out loud, there was a connection, so its senior brother was very surprised. Of course, he would be surprised. Although the name Ba Jie was very ordinary, it was what its senior brother wanted. He must be wondering why its name suited him so well. Right? Ba Jie? Good name. Very good. Lu Xiaoyi did not think of the twists and turns in the story. Was it a coincidence? Of course it was good. You named it yourself. The wild boar was proud because it knew some secrets that its senior brother did not know. And these secrets had to be kept secret for a long time. So long that it could not say it in its lifetime. Ba Jie, your speed is not good. In the future, when you're in the universe, you'll be at a disadvantage if you can't catch up or run away. How about you learned any escape techniques? Or teleportation? The wild boar was embarrassed. Our Silu desolate world does not have any inheritance. We basically practice blindly and rely on our instincts. Lu Xiaoyi asked, then Ba Jie, what's your divine ability? How come I've never seen you use it before? The wild boar was a little embarrassed. Senior brother, you've seen it before. This old pig can eat. Lu Xiaoyi could not continue asking. This guy's situation was really not suitable for living in the universe. It was a typical Yuanying fish belly. However, in the cultivation world, there are many demons like the wild boar that did not have any special characteristics. Just like there were many human cultivators who were not suitable for living in the void. Those he came into contact with were basically the elites of the elites. Jean Dan was like that, and so was Yuan Ying. Therefore, he had never experienced this aspect. But the so-called elites were the minority. The rest of their strength was average. They were the mainstream of the cultivation world. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.